Hello beautiful people. Welcome to Gringotts Hub. In today's episode, we explore, what if Harry used the Potter-Black-Slytherin-Merlin rings to strip the entire Wizengamot of their magic? Hit like, subscribe, and join our community of story lovers. Let's begin. Chapter 1, The Weight of Rings. The goblin's knife was sharper than it looked. Harry watched 3 drops of blood fall onto the parchment, old parchment, the kind that felt like it might crumble if you breathed wrong, except he knew it wouldn't because goblin-made things didn't break unless the goblins wanted them to. The blood hit the surface and sank in like water into sand, and then the parchment began to glow. "You could have warned me," Harry said, sucking his finger. Griphook didn't look up from his ledger. "I said it would require blood." "You didn't say the knife would, never mind." The parchment was writing itself now. Harry had expected something simple. Potter Vault. Maybe the Black Vault, since Sirius had named him heir in his will and the war was over and all that remained was bureaucracy. He'd come to Gringotts on a Tuesday morning in July because Hermione had nagged him about it for 3 weeks straight and he'd finally run out of excuses. The first lines were expected: Harold James Potter, blood heir to the most ancient and noble house of Potter. Harold James Potter, named heir to the most ancient and noble house of Black, confirmed by magic, confirmed by blood through Doria Potter née Black. Harry nodded. Fine. Good. He'd sign whatever needed signing, collect whatever keys needed collecting, and be home in time for lunch. Then the parchment kept writing. Harold James Potter, heir by right of conquest to the most ancient and noble house of Slytherin, blood claimed through Tom Marvolo Riddle, defeated in magical combat, line rights transferred upon death of last heir. Harry's hand, still halfway to his mouth, stopped. What? Griphook looked up now. His dark eyes flicked to the parchment, and something shifted in his expression, not surprise exactly, but a sharpening of attention, the way a banker looks when the numbers suddenly get very large. The parchment was still writing. Harold James Potter, heir by blood and magic to the most ancient and primordial house of Emrys, Merlin, through unbroken maternal line, Evans, Montgomery, Ashworth, Peveril, Emrys. Dormant claim activated upon assumption of 3 noble house lordships. The glow faded. The parchment sat there looking innocent, as though it hadn't just rewritten Harry's entire understanding of his family. Griphook, Harry said carefully. What does that mean? The goblin set down his quill. He looked at Harry for a long moment, and Harry had the uncomfortable feeling of being weighed and measured and appraised like a particularly interesting gemstone. "It means, Mr. Potter," Griphook said, "that I need to get my supervisor." The supervisor was named Ragnarok, and he was either very old or very important or both, because when he entered the room, Griphook actually stood up. Harry had never seen a goblin stand for another goblin before. Ragnarok was shorter than Griphook but broader, built like a small boulder someone had stuffed into a waistcoat. He carried a wooden box under one arm, old wood, dark with age, carved with symbols Harry didn't recognize. "Lord Potter," Ragnarok said, and it wasn't a greeting so much as a statement of fact. He set the box on the desk and looked at Harry with eyes like polished onyx. "Or should I say, Lord Potter-Black-Slytherin Emrys? Though I suspect that would get tedious." "I don't understand what's happening," Harry said. "Then I will explain." Ragnarok sat, not in the client chair but on the edge of the desk itself, which told Harry this wasn't going to be a normal banking conversation. "You killed Tom Riddle." "Yes. Yes. Riddle was the last living heir of Salazar Slytherin. By the ancient laws of magical conquest, laws older than your ministry, older than Hogwarts, old as magic itself, when a wizard kills another wizard in fair combat, certain rights transfer. Slytherin's line is now yours. I didn't want, what you want is irrelevant to magic. Magic does not care about want. It cares about what is." Ragnarok tapped the box. "As for the Emrys line, Merlin's line, that has been dormant for centuries. It passes through the maternal blood, hidden, sleeping, waiting for a descendant who holds 3 noble house lordships simultaneously. The magic recognizes a threshold. You have crossed it. Harry stared at the box. What's in there? Your rings. Ragnarok opened the box. Inside, nestled in black velvet that seemed to eat the light, sat 4 rings. The Potter ring was gold with a ruby, he'd expected that. The black ring was silver with an obsidian stone, darker than anything had a right to be. The Slytherin ring was white gold with an emerald that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. And the 4th ring, the Emrys ring, was something else entirely. It looked like it was made of liquid starlight that had decided to hold still, a metal that wasn't quite metal, set with a stone that shifted color every time Harry's eyes moved. If I put these on, Harry said slowly, what happens? Ragnarok smiled, showing teeth. Many things. You become one of the wealthiest wizards alive. You gain seats on the Wizengamot, 4 of them. The Slytherin seat has been empty for centuries. The Emrys seat has been empty for longer. You gain properties, artifacts, libraries. He paused. And you gain the right to invoke something called the Founder's Judgment. The room was very quiet. Tell me about that, Harry said. It took Ragnarok an hour to explain. Harry listened without interrupting, which was unlike him, but the weight of what he was hearing pressed him into silence. The Wizengamot wasn't just a government body. It had been created as a magical institution, literally magical, bound by magic, constrained by magic. When Merlin and the founders established it, they'd woven oaths into its very foundation. Every member, upon taking their seat, swore magically binding oaths, to judge fairly, to serve the magical community, to place justice above personal gain. The oaths weren't decorative. They were supposed to mean something. But they don't, Harry said. They can't. I've seen what the Wizengamot does. They let Death Eaters buy their way out of Azkaban. They threw Sirius in without a trial. They voted to put Dementors around a school full of children. You are correct, Ragnarok said. The oaths have been circumvented. Over centuries, members found ways to technically satisfy the letter of their vows while violating the spirit. They convinced themselves their corruption served the community. They redefined justice to mean whatever kept them in power. The magic grew confused. Weakened. But it did not disappear. And the Founder's Judgment? A failsafe. Built into the chamber itself, into the seats, into the magic that binds the Wizengamot together. If a wizard holds the authority of all 4 founding lines, and Merlin's line stands above even the founders, they may invoke judgment. The magic of the oaths activates. Every member who has violated their sworn duty is stripped of their magic. Permanently. Harry sat back in his chair. The wood creaked. Permanently, he repeated. Yes. How many members would that affect? Ragnarok's smile returned, sharper this time. Based on our records of Wizengamot voting patterns, financial transactions, and, shall we say, other intelligence the nation has gathered over the centuries. At minimum, 43 of the 52 current seated members. Harry did the math. That was nearly everyone. That was the entire government, essentially. Wiped out. And the ones who keep their magic? Those who have genuinely upheld their oaths. We estimate 9 members would survive the judgment unscathed. Perhaps fewer. Harry looked at the rings in their box. 4 small circles of metal. 4 keys to a weapon that could demolish the entire structure of magical Britain's government in a single stroke. Why hasn't anyone done this before? He asked. Because no one has held all 4 lines simultaneously in over 800 years. And because the information about the Founder's Judgment is not widely known. It exists in Goblin records because we helped build the original Wizengamot chamber. We remember what wizards choose to forget. Why are you telling me this? Ragnarok looked at him for a long time. Because the goblins have dealt with your Wizengamot for 1,000 years, Lord Potter. We have watched them break every treaty, violate every accord, and treat our people as servants and animals while hiding behind oaths they stopped honoring before the ink was dry. We are telling you this because you asked. And because you are perhaps the first wizard in 8 centuries who might actually do something about it. Harry reached for the Potter ring first. It slid onto his right ring finger like it had been waiting for him, warm and alive, and magic rushed through him, not painful, just present, like a river he hadn't known was dammed had suddenly been let loose. The black ring went on his right middle finger. The Slytherin ring on his left ring finger. Each one added to the current, layers of power building on each other, resonating. He picked up the Emrys ring last. It was lighter than it should have been, almost weightless, and it seemed to hum against his fingertips. Any last warnings? Harry asked. Only that once you wear all 4, you cannot unknow what you know. You cannot unfeel what you will feel. The rings will show you the truth of everyone's magic around you, including whether they have broken oaths. You will see it. You will not be able to ignore it. Harry put on the ring. The world changed. It wasn't dramatic, no explosion of light, no thunderclap. But suddenly everything was more. He could feel the magic in the walls of Gringotts, old and deep and carved with intention. He could feel Ragnarok's magic, fierce and contained and proud. He could feel the wards on the building pressing against his awareness like whispers in another room. And he could feel something else. A thread. No, thousands of threads, stretching out from him in every direction, connecting to something distant. The Wizengamot chamber. He could feel it like a spider feels its web. Well, Harry said, and his voice sounded the same, which was somehow surprising. That's something. Ragnarok nodded. Indeed, Lord Potter. Will there be anything else? The records, Harry said. Of the Wizengamot. Voting histories, financial transactions, everything you mentioned. Can I have copies? They are already being prepared. They will be delivered to your Potter vault within the hour. Harry stood. The rings gleamed on his fingers, and he could feel them talking to each other, not in words, but in harmonics, like 4 instruments finding a chord. Thank you, Ragnarok. Do not thank us yet, the goblin said. Thank us when it is done. Diagon Alley was different now. Not physically, it was the same cobblestone street, the same leaning shops, the same witches and wizards going about their Tuesday. But Harry could see the magic now, really see it, layered over everything like a second skin on the world. The wards on shops glowed faintly. The enchantments on signs pulsed. And the people, every witch and wizard who passed him had a core of light inside them, some bright, some dim, all unique. He pulled his hood up, not out of fear but out of practicality. He didn't want to be stopped. He didn't want to have conversations. He needed to think. He'd killed Voldemort 2 months ago. 2 months. And in that time, the Wizengamot had already gone back to business as usual. Lucius Malfoy was already walking free, Imperious defense, again, aided by 12 character witnesses and what Harry strongly suspected were several large donations to the right people. The Death Eaters who'd been captured at the Battle of Hogwarts were getting trials, sure, but the trials were slow, and the sentences were inconsistent, and the ones with money kept walking out with slaps on the wrist. And nobody had apologized to him. Nobody had acknowledged that they'd spent his 5th year calling him a liar and a lunatic while Voldemort rebuilt his army. Nobody had answered for Sirius, for 12 years in Azkaban without a trial, for a death that wouldn't have happened if the system had worked even once the way it was supposed to. Harry had been willing to let it go. After the war, he'd been tired. He'd thought about just disappearing. Taking the money and going somewhere warm and forgetting that magical Britain existed. Hermione could reform it. She was good at that. But here was the thing, Hermione couldn't reform it. Nobody could. Because the people who ran the system were the ones who benefited from it being broken, and they would never, voluntarily fix it. Harry had watched Hermione try for 2 months. He'd watched her draft proposals and write letters and cite precedents, and he'd watched the Wizengamot smile politely and table everything and go right back to selling influence and protecting their friends. The system couldn't be fixed from within. Harry knew what he was going to do. He'd known it the moment Ragnarok said the words, stripped of their magic. He'd known it in his bones, in the part of him that had watched Sirius fall through the veil, that had watched Cedric die, that had carried a piece of Voldemort's soul for 16 years while the people who were supposed to protect him played politics. He was going to burn it down. Not with fire. Not with violence. With their own oaths turned against them. With the very magic they'd sworn on and then betrayed. It was, Harry thought, the most just punishment imaginable. They'd used their magic to hurt people, to oppress people, to let evil flourish while they counted their gold. They didn't deserve it. He was going to take it from them. You look like a man with a plan. Harry stopped walking. The voice had come from his left, a cafe with outdoor seating, wrought iron tables under a blue awning. A young woman sat alone at the nearest table, one leg crossed over the other, a cup of tea steaming in front of her. She had dark hair pulled back from a sharp face, blue eyes that watched him with open calculation, and she was smiling like she knew something. "Do I know you?" Harry asked. "Daphne Greengrass. We were in the same year at Hogwarts." She gestured at the empty chair across from her. "Sit down, Potter. Or should I say Lord Potter-Black-Slytherin and Emrys? Word travels fast in Gringotts." "Well, fast to the right ears." Harry didn't sit. "You have sources inside Gringotts?" "I have sources everywhere. It's the family business. Information." She sipped her tea. "Relax. I'm not here to threaten you or sell you out. I'm here because I think we want the same thing, and I think you're about to do something very large and very public and very irreversible without a political strategy, and that would be a waste. You don't know what I'm about to do. You walked out of Gringotts wearing 4 lordship rings, one of which hasn't been claimed in 800 years. You're not planning to redecorate." She set her cup down. "Sit. Please. Give me 10 minutes. If you don't like what I have to say, you walk away," and we never spoke. Harry looked at her. The rings pulsed gently against his fingers, and he could feel her magic, clean, bright, unbroken. No violated oaths clinging to her like cobwebs. Whatever Daphne Greengrass was, she wasn't corrupt. He sat down. "Talk," he said. Daphne leaned forward, elbows on the table, and the smile dropped away. What was underneath was sharper, hungrier, more real. "My father voted against werewolf protections in 1993. He voted to restrict Muggleborn access to apprenticeships in 1994. He voted to acquit Lucius Malfoy after the First War and again 3 weeks ago." She held Harry's gaze. "I love my father. And he is part of the problem. I've known it since I was 14 years old, and I've spent every year since then watching the Wizengamot rot from the inside while people like Hermione Granger send strongly worded letters that go directly into the bin. So what do you want?" "I want it torn down. I want it rebuilt properly. And I want to help you do it, because you're going to do it whether I help or not, and if you do it without someone who understands the political landscape, you'll create a power vacuum that someone worse will fill." Harry studied her. "And what do you get out of it?" "A seat at the table when the new one is built. A say in what comes next. And," she paused, something flickering across her face. "My little sister. Astoria. She's cursed. Blood curse, hereditary, passed down through pure-blood families because they kept intermarrying to keep their lines pure. The Wizengamot has blocked funding for blood curse research for 30 years because acknowledging blood curses exist would mean acknowledging that pure-blood ideology is killing purebloods. So yes. I have personal stakes." That was honest. Harry appreciated honest. "If I do what I'm planning," he said, "your father loses his magic. You understand that?" Daphne didn't flinch. "My father broke his oaths. I know exactly how and when and about what. If there are consequences for that," she swallowed. Just once, just slightly. Then there are consequences. He made choices. I'm making mine. You'd sacrifice your own father's magic for this? I'd sacrifice my own father's magic for my sister's life, Daphne said, and there was no uncertainty in it. Wouldn't you? Harry thought about Sirius. About what he would have done, what he had done, for the people he loved. Yeah, he said. I would. Then we understand each other. She extended her hand across the table. Partners? Harry shook it. Her grip was firm and dry and her magic hummed against his where their skin touched, a resonance, not a clash. Partners. But I make the final calls. Naturally. You're the one with the rings. She released his hand and picked her tea back up like they'd just agreed on lunch plans rather than the demolition of a government. Now. When are you planning to do this? Soon. Define soon. The next Wizengamot session. Daphne set her tea down again. That's in 6 days. I know. That's insane. You need preparation. You need allies. I need the element of surprise, Harry said. Every day I wait is a day someone figures out what these rings can do and tries to stop me. You said word travels fast. How fast? Daphne's eyes narrowed. Then she nodded slowly. Fast enough. You're right. If Malfoy finds out about the Emrys ring specifically, he'll move heaven and earth to block you. He might already be hearing rumors. She pulled a small notebook from her bag, leather-bound, enchanted. Harry could see the privacy wards on it glowing. 6 days. Fine. We can work with 6 days. But you need more than just me. I know. I need Neville. Longbottom. Daphne tilted her head. Why? Because he's my friend, because his grandmother sits on the Wizengamot and actually keeps her oaths, and because he deserves to watch the people who let Bellatrix Lestrange walk free the first time lose everything. Something softened in Daphne's expression. Just slightly. That's not entirely strategic. Not everything has to be. Fair enough. Who else? Hermione and Ron know me too well to not figure out something's happening, so I'll bring them in. But carefully. Hermione's going to have concerns. Ethical ones. She'll want to make sure it's justified. She'll want to see the evidence. I can provide evidence, Daphne said. Volumes of it. Financial records, voting transcripts cross-referenced with donations, private correspondence my family has collected over generations. The Greengrass family has been documenting Wizengamot corruption for over a century. We just never had anyone who could do anything with it. Harry looked at her. Why did your family collect all that? Insurance. She shrugged. We're neutral, Potter. We've always been neutral. Neutrality requires knowing where all the bodies are buried so that neither side can afford to push you. My grandfather started the archives. My father continued them. I've been organizing them since I was 15. She smiled again, that sharp knowing smile. I told you. Information is the family business. And now you're handing that leverage over to me. I'm investing it. There's a difference. She finished her tea and stood, gathering her bag. Come to Greengrass Manor tomorrow morning. I'll have the evidence organized by Wizengamot member. You'll be able to see exactly who violated what oath and when. Bring Longbottom if you want. She paused. And Potter? Yeah. Don't wear those rings openly until you're ready. The Potter and Black rings are expected, you're the known heir. But if anyone sees the Slytherin or Emrys rings before you want them to, we lose the element of surprise. Harry looked down at his hands. She was right, tactically, not philosophically. He wasn't hiding. He wasn't afraid. But there was a difference between hiding and choosing your moment. He pulled the Slytherin and Emrys rings off and put them in his pocket. They hummed against his thigh, displeased, but the more actions write the next chapter now. Chapter 2, The Devil's Arithmetic. Greengrass Manor sat behind a wall of old oaks at the end of a gravel drive in Wiltshire, and it looked nothing like Harry had expected. Where Malfoy Manor was all imposing gates and peacocks and cold grandeur designed to make visitors feel small, this was a home. Large, yes. Old, certainly. But there were flowers in window boxes and a fat ginger cat sleeping on the front step, and the words that washed over Harry as he crossed the boundary felt more like a question than a warning. Who are you? What do you intend? He felt his magic answer automatically, the rings resonating with the ancient ward stone buried somewhere beneath the property. The wards relaxed around him like a held breath releasing. Neville was already there. Harry had sent him an owl at midnight, 3 lines, no explanation, just come to Greengrass Manor tomorrow morning, trust me, bring your wand, and Neville had shown up without question. That was Neville. That had always been Neville. He was sitting in the entrance hall when Harry walked in, perched on an antique chair that looked too delicate for him, his broad frame awkward against the carved wood. Daphne stood by the doorway to what looked like a study, arms crossed. He wouldn't tell me anything until you arrived, Daphne said. Loyal, this one. You didn't tell me anything either, Neville pointed out. Hard to share information I don't have. Fair. Harry crossed the hall and clapped Neville on the shoulder. Thanks for coming. You said trust me. I trust you. Neville stood, brushing down his robes. But I'd appreciate knowing why I'm in Daphne Greengrass's house at 8 in the morning. Come into the study, Daphne said. Both of you. The study was larger than it looked from outside, magically expanded, probably, though the expansion was old enough that the seams didn't show. Bookshelves lined every wall, floor to ceiling, and a massive oak table dominated the center of the room. On it, stacked in precise columns, were files. Hundreds of them. Each one labeled with a name Harry recognized. Malfoy. Not. Parkinson. Avery. Greengrass. Bones. Ogden. Dumbledore. Sit down, Neville, Harry said. This is going to take a minute. It took more than a minute. It took an hour, because Harry explained everything, the inheritance test, the 4 rings, the Founder's judgment, all of it, and Neville listened without interrupting, his face going through about 6 different emotions before settling on something hard and quiet that Harry had only seen once before, on the night Neville had pulled the sword of Gryffindor from the sorting hat and taken Nagini's head off. When Harry finished, the silence stretched for a long time. You're going to strip Bellatrix's jury of their magic, Neville said finally. Not a question. Every single one who voted to acquit her the first time is still sitting on the Wizengamot, yeah. They let her walk. After what she did to my parents. Neville's hands were flat on the table, pressed hard enough that his knuckles were white. Crouch Sr. was on that jury. He's dead. But the others, Malfoy pushed for acquittal. Not. Parkinson. They knew what she'd done and they let her go, and she spent 14 years in Azkaban anyway, and my parents spent 14 years in the Janus Thicky ward, and nobody, he stopped. Breathed. Nobody answered for it. They will now, Harry said. Neville looked up at him, and his eyes were bright and fierce. What do you need from me? Your support. Your presence. And your grandmother. Gran. Neville nodded slowly. She's one of the clean ones. Daphne? Daphne pulled a file from the stack, thin, much thinner than the others. Augusta Longbottom. 41 years on the Wizengamot. Voting record is almost aggressively consistent with her oaths. She's voted against her own financial interests 6 times that I can document. She's voted against her political allies when she believed they were wrong. She argued publicly for Sirius Black to receive a trial in 1981 and was shouted down. She set the file in front of Neville. Your grandmother is one of perhaps 9 members who will survive the judgment with their magic intact. Neville picked up the file and paged through it, and a strange expression crossed his face, pride, maybe, mixed with something sadder. She always said the Wizengamot had lost its way. I thought she was just being old-fashioned. She was being accurate, Daphne said. She turned to Harry. Which brings us to the work. 6 days isn't long, but it's enough if we're focused. You need to understand who you're dealing with, not just names, but alliances, leverage, personality. When you walk into that chamber, you need to know exactly who will try what. She waved her wand, and the files on the table rearranged themselves, fanning out across the surface like cards in a deck. Another wave, and a large piece of parchment unrolled in the air above the table, a web of connections, names linked by colored threads. Red for financial ties. Blue for family. Green for political alliance. Black for blackmail. There's a lot of black, Neville observed. Welcome to magical politics. Daphne tapped a cluster of names at the center of the web. This is the core. Malfoy, Knott, Parkinson, Avery, Selwyn, Rowell. The old Death Eater families. They're the most obviously corrupt, but honestly, they're not your biggest problem. They're not. Harry said. No. Because everyone expects them to be corrupt. Nobody will mourn their magic. Your problem, she tapped another cluster, slightly offset from the first, is the middle. The fence-sitters. The ones who aren't Death Eaters but who've spent decades taking favors, cutting deals, looking the other way. Ogden. Doge. Marchbanks. Folly. Bones, not Amelia, her Uncle Edgar's old seat, held now by a cousin who's been selling votes since 1989. And Dumbledore? Harry asked, looking at the old man's name on the web, connected by blue threads to several moderate members. Daphne hesitated. That alone told Harry something. Dumbledore is complicated. His voting record is better than most. He's pushed for progressive causes, protected Muggleborn rights, argued against pure-blood supremacy. But he's also used his position to manipulate, to place people where he wanted them, to protect his own power base. Has he violated his oaths? She pulled his file, thicker than Augusta's, thinner than Malfoy's. Honestly? It's borderline. The magic might spare him. Or it might not. I genuinely don't know. I need to talk to him, Harry said. Before. Not to ask permission. But, he should hear it from me. Neville and Daphne both looked at him, and he could see them thinking the same thing. Is that strategic or sentimental? Harry didn't care which it was. Dumbledore had manipulated him, yes. Had kept secrets, had made Harry's life a chess piece in a larger game. But the man had also sacrificed everything to fight Voldemort, had genuinely cared in his own broken, distant way, and Harry wasn't going to blindside him. After we finish here, Harry said. Today. Daphne nodded, not arguing. Then let's get through the files. Every member. I'll give you the summary, what they've done, what oaths they've broken, how certain we are. They worked through the morning and into the afternoon. Daphne was methodical and precise. She knew this information like she'd been carrying it for years, which she had. Each file was a story, and most of the stories were ugly. Malfoy, bribery of 17 different officials, financial manipulation of votes, use of the Imperious defense knowing it to be false, documented in a letter to Knott from 1982 that Daphne's grandfather had intercepted, obstruction of justice in at least 4 murder cases. Knott Sr., similar to Malfoy but crueler, he'd personally blocked compensation for victims of Death Eater attacks, argued that Muggleborn casualties were acceptable losses, in private session minutes that were supposed to have been destroyed. Parkinson had sold his vote so consistently that Daphne had a literal price list, updated annually, showing what each type of vote cost. But it was the middle names that turned Harry's stomach most. The ones who weren't evil, just weak. Selfish. Lazy in their cruelty. Elphia's doge, Dumbledore's old friend, who'd voted against the Werewolf Protection Act because it would have decreased property values near his estate in Cornwall. Griselda Marchbanks, who'd accepted gifts from the Malfoy family for 20 years while sitting on the examination board, not outright bribery, technically, but a corruption of impartiality that had shaped who passed newts and who didn't for a generation. Tiberius Ogden, who'd resigned from the Wizengamot in protest once, making a grand show of principles, and then quietly returned 6 months later after accepting a consulting fee from 3 different families who needed his vote on an upcoming trade bill. They're all like this? Neville asked, somewhere around the 30th file. Virtually all, Daphne said. That's the point. It's not one bad apple. It's the whole orchard. The system doesn't corrupt individuals, it requires corruption to function. You can't sit on the Wizengamot for more than a few years without either compromising your principles or being completely sidelined. Your father's file, Harry said. He'd noticed she hadn't pulled it. Daphne's jaw tightened. She reached into the stack and pulled a file, medium thickness, and set it in front of Harry without opening it. Cyrus Greengrass, she said, her voice carefully neutral. Voting irregularities on 3 occasions. Accepted financial consideration from the Malfoy family in exchange for neutrality on the Muggleborn Employment Act of 1994. Failed to report knowledge of illegal activities by sitting members. She paused. He's not the worst. He's not even close to the worst. But he's guilty. Harry opened the file. The evidence was meticulous, dates, amounts, cross-references. Daphne had documented her own father's corruption with the same precision she'd applied to everyone else. You already knew all this, Harry said. Before I showed up with the rings. You've been building this archive knowing it might never be useful. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst. She took the file back and returned it to the stack. My father is a good man who made compromises with a bad system because he told himself it was the only way to protect his family. That's what they all tell themselves. But Astoria is dying, and the system he compromised with is the reason no one is looking for a cure, and I will not. She stopped. Steadied herself. I've made my peace with it. Harry nodded. He didn't push. They broke for lunch, sandwiches that a house elf brought without being asked, and tea that refilled itself, and then they spent another 2 hours on strategy. Not what Harry was doing, that was settled, but how. The order of operations. The legal framework that would make it as clean as possible. You can't just walk in and invoke it immediately, Daphne said. Well, you can. Magically, you can. But if you do it without any preamble, without giving them a chance to see what's coming, you lose the moral high ground. I don't care about moral high ground. You should. Because after you strip 43 people of their magic, you need the rest of the world to see it as justice rather than tyranny. Presentation matters. She was right, and Harry knew it, even though the impatient part of him wanted to just do it and damn the consequences. So what do you suggest? Take your seats first. Officially. That's your legal right and no one can block it, the magic of the chamber itself will recognize you. Let them see the rings. Let them understand who you are and what you hold. Then, give them a chance. Invoke the Oath Reaffirmation Protocol. It's an ancient right of any seated lord to demand that members restate their oaths. If they've truly kept their oaths, it costs them nothing. If they haven't, they'll refuse. Some will refuse. Some will try and fail. Some will try to leave. She tapped the table. And that's when you invoke the judgment. After they've been given the chance. After they've demonstrated their guilt in front of witnesses. After the chamber's magic has already begun to identify the oathbreakers. She's right, Neville said. He'd been quiet for a while, absorbing, but his voice was steady. My gran always says justice isn't just about the outcome, it's about the process being visible. People need to see why. Otherwise you're just another Dark Lord seizing power. Harry looked at his hands. The Potter and Black rings glinted in the afternoon light. The Slytherin and Emrys rings were in his pocket, but he could feel them there, a constant low thrum of power. Fine, he said. We do it your way. I take my seats, I invoke the reaffirmation, and when they fail, I invoke the judgment. And between now and then, Daphne said, we prepare for the countermoves. Malfoy isn't stupid. If he hears even a whisper of what's coming, he'll try to stop you. He might try to have you killed. He might try to change the laws before you can act. He might try to get you declared mentally unfit. Let him try, Harry said, and he meant it. The power of 4 houses hummed in his blood, ancient and vast and patient. Let Lucius Malfoy try whatever he wanted. Harry had killed Voldemort with less than this. Confidence is good, Daphne said dryly. Arrogance gets people killed. That wasn't arrogance. That was a statement of fact. She studied him for a moment, then nodded. Fair enough. Harry found Dumbledore in the Hogwarts library. It was strange being back. The castle was mostly repaired, the magic of the building itself had done much of the work, stones crawling back into place, walls reknitting themselves, but there were still scars. Patches of newer stone among the old. A corridor on the 7th floor that didn't quite line up. The place where Fred had died was marked by a subtle depression in the wall, as though the castle itself remembered and grieved. Dumbledore was sitting at a table near the restricted section, half a dozen books open around him, writing something in that cramped slanted hand of his. He looked old. Not the performative twinkly-eyed old of Harry's school years, but genuinely aged, worn thin. His right hand was still blackened and dead from the ring curse, though it moved well enough. His eyes, when they looked up, were still sharp. But tired. Harry, he said, and there was no surprise in it. Of course not. Dumbledore always seemed to know. Professor. I am no longer your professor. You may call me Albus, if you like. Dumbledore's fine. Harry pulled out a chair and sat across from him. You know why I'm here. Dumbledore set down his quill. He looked at Harry's hands, the Potter ring, the black ring, and his eyes lingered, and Harry knew he was looking for the ones that weren't visible. I know that you visited Gringotts yesterday, Dumbledore said carefully. And I know that the goblins performed an inheritance test. Beyond that, I have heard rumors. They're not rumors. Harry reached into his pocket and placed the Slytherin ring and the Emrys ring on the table between them. They sat there, gleaming, impossible. Dumbledore stared at them for a long time. Merlin's line, he whispered. Through Lily. Through the Evans family. Dormant for centuries. Dumbledore leaned back in his chair. His good hand came up to his face, pressing against his eyes for a moment. When it dropped, he looked older still. And do you know what these rings together permit you to do? The Founder's judgment. Yes. Then you know more than I do. I have read references to such a thing, oblique references, in texts so old they predate modern English, but I never believed it was more than myth. He looked at Harry, and his gaze was penetrating, that old power still there behind the weariness. You intend to use it? Yes. Against the entire Wizengamot. Against the ones who broke their oaths. Which is most of them. Dumbledore was quiet for a long moment. He reached for one of the open books, closed it gently, set it aside. Then another. Creating space between them on the table, clearing a field. Harry, he said. I must ask you to reconsider. No. I am not asking you to abandon the idea entirely. I am asking you to pause. To think. To consider what it means to strip magic from, how many? 40. More. 43, at minimum. Dumbledore closed his eyes. 43 people. Some of them elderly. Some of them with families who depend on their magic. Some of them are the people who let Sirius rot in Azkaban, Harry said, and his voice was level but something underneath it was not. Some of them are the people who let Death Eaters buy their freedom. Some of them are the people who called me a liar while Voldemort recruited an army. I know exactly who they are, Dumbledore. I have files on every single one of them. I don't doubt it. I don't doubt their guilt. What I doubt is whether this nuclear option, is truly justice, or whether it is vengeance wearing justice's face. Harry considered that. He owed Dumbledore that much, to actually consider it rather than dismiss it. Does it matter? He asked. If the result is the same. If corrupt officials lose the magic they use to perpetuate corruption, does it matter whether my motivation is justice or anger? It matters to you, Dumbledore said. It matters to the man you are becoming. Power exercised in anger corrodes the wielder. Power used while people suffer corrodes everything else. Harry leaned forward. You knew. You knew for years, decades, that the Wizengamot was corrupt. You sat in that chamber and watched them sell votes and acquit murderers and block reforms. You had more influence than anyone alive. You could have fought them. I did fight them. In the ways available to me, you compromised with them. You played their game. You traded favors and built alliances and accepted the pace of incremental change while people died. Harry wasn't shouting. He was very calm, which was worse somehow. You let Sirius go to Azkaban. You were chief warlock. You could have demanded a trial. Dumbledore flinched. It was small, barely visible, but Harry saw it. I have carried that failure for 15 years. Carrying it isn't the same as fixing it. No. Dumbledore's voice was barely above a whisper. No, it is not. He was quiet again, staring at the two rings on the table as though they were live serpents. You are right that I compromised. You are right that my compromises had costs paid by others, not by me. I told myself I was being strategic. Patient. That change must come slowly or it comes violently and destroys what it aims to save. And how did that work out? It didn't. The admission seemed to cost him something. Voldemort returned. The Wizengamot enabled him through inaction and corruption. Everything I built, every careful alliance, every incremental gain, was swept away in a year because the foundations were rotten. He looked up at Harry. You're right. I know you're right. But I am frightened of what you're proposing nonetheless. Why? Because you are concentrating in one person, in yourself, more power than any individual has held in 8 centuries. And because I have spent my entire life watching what power does to people, including myself. The Hallows tempted me. The Elder Wand tempted me. I know in my bones, what it feels like to hold power and tell yourself you'll use it wisely, justly, only for good. And I know how quickly those promises erode. Harry met his eyes. I'm not you. No. You're not. You are, in many ways, a better man than I ever was. But that doesn't make you immune. I'm not going to rule them, Dumbledore. I'm not making myself minister or emperor or anything else. I'm going to break the old system so something better can be built. I'm going to invoke the judgment, and then I'm going to step back. Can you? Once you have that power, once you've used it, can you truly set it down? Watch me. They looked at each other across the table. 2 wizards. One old, one young. One who had spent a lifetime learning that power corrupts, and one who had already survived the ultimate corruption, a piece of Voldemort's soul, and come out clean. You won't support me, Harry said. Not a question. I cannot publicly support the stripping of magic from anyone. It is too close to what Voldemort would have done to Muggleborns. The parallel will be drawn, Harry, whether it is fair or not. Then stay neutral. Don't fight me. Dumbledore was quiet for a long time. "I will not fight you," he said finally. "But I will be there. In the chamber. And if I believe you are crossing a line, if I believe you are becoming something you would not want to be, I will speak. You can speak all you want. And if speaking is not enough?" Harry stood. He picked up the 2 rings from the table and pocketed them. "Then I suppose we'll find out whether your oaths are intact or not." He paused at the door. "For what it's worth, I hope they are. I hope you're one of the 9. He left Dumbledore sitting there among his books, an old man staring at the place where 2 impossible rings had been, looking like the future had already arrived and he didn't know what to make of it. 2 days before the session, Lucius Malfoy invited Harry to lunch. The owl arrived at Grimmauld Place, which Harry was using as a base, the Black family home now his by right, with all the understated elegance of everything Malfoy did. Cream parchment. Green ink. A suggestion of meeting at a restaurant in Wizarding Paris, neutral ground, just 2 lords having a civilized conversation. Harry showed the letter to Daphne, who'd essentially moved into Grimmauld Place's study for the duration. She read it twice, her lips pressed thin. "He knows something," she said. "Obviously. The question is how much. He can't know about the judgment specifically. That's goblin knowledge, and the goblins wouldn't share it with him, they despise him personally, something about an insult to the Gringotts director in 1978 that's never been forgiven." She set the letter down. "But he knows about the seats. He must. The Slytherin and Emrys seats have been empty for centuries. If anyone's been monitoring them, waiting for them to be claimed, it's Lucius. He has contacts in the Wizengamot records office. So he knows I have 4 seats. He doesn't know what I can do with them. He knows you're a threat. 4 seats is an enormous voting bloc. The Potter and Black seats alone give you significant influence, add Slytherin and Emrys, and you control more votes than any single individual in the chamber. He'll want to neutralize you politically before you even sit down. Then I should go to lunch." Daphne's head snapped up. "Absolutely not. He could be planning, he's not going to attack me at a restaurant. That's not his style. Lucius Malfoy doesn't use violence when he can use words." Harry folded the letter. "And I want to see his face. I want to know what he's thinking. I'm coming with you." "No. He invited me alone. If I bring someone, he'll know I'm building a coalition, and he'll adjust his strategy. If I go alone, he'll think I'm overconfident and isolated. Let him think that." Daphne looked like she wanted to argue, but she didn't. She'd agreed that Harry made the final calls, and she held to it, even when it clearly grated. "Fine. But we're all 4 rings. If he tries anything magical, the combined house protections will shield you." "I was going to anyway." She looked at him, a long, searching look. "You're enjoying this." Harry considered denying it, but that would be dishonest. "A little bit. Is that a problem?" "Not yet," she said. "Just, don't enjoy it so much that you get sloppy." The restaurant was called Le Chaudron d'Or, and it was the kind of place where the napkins probably cost more than Harry's entire wardrobe in primary school. Crystal chandeliers. Waiters who moved like ghosts. Private dining rooms warded for confidentiality. Lucius was already seated when Harry arrived. Of course he was, because Lucius Malfoy would never give someone else the advantage of being first. He rose as Harry entered, impeccably dressed in charcoal robes with silver trim, his hair a pale curtain, his expression arranged in that perfect mask of civilized pleasantness that Harry had wanted to punch off his face since he was 12. "Lord Potter," Lucius said, and his eyes went to Harry's hands immediately. Harry had worn all 4 rings openly. He watched Lucius clock each one, the flicker of recognition at Potter and Black, the slight widening of pupils at Slytherin, and then the barely perceptible freeze when his gaze reached the Emrys ring. "Malfoy," Harry said, not adding the Lord. He sat without being invited. "Nice place. I'm glad you agreed to come." Lucius sat as well, his composure recovered so quickly that most people wouldn't have noticed it slipping. But Harry wasn't most people. Not anymore. With the rings active, he could see the edges of Lucius's magic, could see the grayish taint of broken oaths clinging to him like smoke. I thought it was time we spoke. Man to man, as it were. We are both lords of noble houses. We have shared interests. Do we? The stability of our world. The preservation of our institutions. Surely these are interests we share. A waiter appeared, poured wine, disappeared. Lucius lifted his glass. To new beginnings. Harry didn't touch his glass. You spent 6 years trying to kill me or get me killed. You planted a Horcrux on an 11-year-old girl. You led Death Eaters in the Department of Mysteries. You stood next to Voldemort while he tortured people in your house. Lucius didn't flinch, Harry had to give him that. His smile didn't even waver. The war is over, Lord Potter. I was misled. Coerced. The Wizengamot has reviewed my case and found, the Wizengamot found what you paid them to find. Now a flicker. Just a tiny one, behind the eyes. That is a serious accusation. It's not an accusation. It's a fact. You paid Ogden 40,000 galleons in 1995 through a shell company registered in Wizarding Liechtenstein. You paid Doge 30,000 through his wife's charitable foundation. You paid Folly in political favors rather than gold, specifically, your support for his nephew's appointment to the Regulation of Magical Creatures office. Shall I continue? Lucius set his wine glass down. The mask was still there, but it was thinner now. Harry could see the calculations happening behind it, rapid, razor-sharp. This was a man who had survived 2 wars, 2 masters, and decades of political combat. He was dangerous. He was also, Harry realized with something like cold satisfaction, afraid. You've done your research, Lucius said. I have. Then you know that such arrangements are how our system functions. They are not corruption, Lord Potter. They are politics. Every member of the Wizengamot has engaged in similar practices. It is how consensus is built. Is that what you tell yourself? Lucius leaned forward slightly. The pleasantness was dropping away now, revealing something sharper underneath, the real Lucius, the one who'd stood in Dumbledore's office and threatened school governors, the one who'd whispered in Fudge's ear for years. Let me be direct. You have 4 seats. That is, unprecedented. But seats are only useful if you have allies to vote with you. 4 is impressive. 4 is not a majority. I don't need a majority. Everyone needs a majority. That is how the Wizengamot works. Maybe, Harry said, I'm not planning to work within the Wizengamot. Silence. Lucius's fingers tightened around his wine glass, just fractionally. What exactly are you planning, Potter? Harry stood. He hadn't touched his wine, hadn't eaten, hadn't been here more than 5 minutes. I suppose you'll find out in 2 days. He turned to leave, and Lucius's voice followed him, stripped now of all pretense, hard and cold. Be very careful. You are young. You have power, yes. But you do not understand the forces you are provoking. There are people on that body who have played this game since before you were born. They will not simply allow. Harry turned back. The rings on his fingers flared, not dramatically, not for show, but because his magic responded to his intent, and his intent was very clear. The air in the private dining room grew heavy. The crystal chandelier above them chimed faintly. Lucius's wine glass cracked, a hairline fracture running up the stem. Nobody needs to allow me anything, Malfoy. Not anymore. He left. Behind him, he heard the wine glass shatter completely. That night, Grimmauld Place was full. Neville sat in the drawing room with his grandmother. Augusta Longbottom had arrived an hour ago, ramrod straight and sharp-eyed, and when Harry had explained what he planned, she had listened without expression and then said, "Good. It's about bloody time." That had been the extent of her moral deliberation. Now she was providing tactical information, chamber layout, where members sat, the physical warding of the Wizengamot chamber, emergency exits, which members carried concealed wands to sessions despite the rules. "Malfoy always has a secondary wand in a forearm holster," she said. "Left arm. He's had it since 1982. Everyone knows. Nobody enforces the rule because the people who'd enforce it are the same people breaking it," Harry finished. "Right." Hermione and Ron arrived at 9. Harry had sent them both detailed letters, everything, held nothing back, and asked them to come if they wanted to be part of this. Ron walked in, looked at Harry, looked at the rings, and said, "Wicked. What do you need me to do?" Hermione walked in, looked at Harry, looked at the rings, looked at the piles of evidence on the table, and said, "I need 3 hours with those files before I can give you my answer." It took her 2 hours and 40 minutes. She came out of the study pale and quiet, and she sat next to Harry on the sofa and said, "Some of these people voted against the House Elf Liberation Act 7 times. 7 times. While having evidence in front of them, that elves can suffer and feel pain and, Hermione. I'm in. She wiped her eyes. God, Harry. I knew it was bad. I didn't know it was this bad. Nobody does. That's how they get away with it. The legal framework is sound," she said, switching from emotional to analytical in that way she had. "The founder's judgment isn't a law, it's deeper than law. It's built into the magical structure of the institution. They can't repeal it because they didn't pass it. They can't block it because the authority of the ring supersedes their procedural rules. The only possible challenge would be to dispute your claim to one of the lines, and the goblins have verified all 4 by blood and magic. Then there's no legal defense." She took a breath. "Harry, this is going to be, the world is going to change. You understand that? This isn't reform. This is revolution." "Yes. And you're sure? You're really sure?" He looked at her, his best friend, his conscience, the person who'd stuck with him through everything. "Hermione. Name one thing the Wizengamot has done in the last 20 years that made our world better." She opened her mouth. Closed it. Thought. Opened it again. Closed it again. "Exactly," Harry said. Daphne came in then from the kitchen, carrying tea, and she and Hermione regarded each other with the wary assessment of 2 very intelligent women who hadn't yet decided if they were allies or rivals. But Daphne handed Hermione a cup and said, "The files on house elf legislation are in the 3rd stack. There's evidence that Fudge personally killed the Protection of Magical Beings Act in 1996 because Malfoy's elf-made wine business would have been affected." Hermione took the tea. "Show me." They disappeared into the study together, and Harry heard them talking, first carefully, then with increasing intensity, then with the rapid-fire energy of 2 minds finding a common frequency. Ron dropped onto the sofa next to Harry. "So," he said. "We're really doing this?" "Yeah. Stripping the magic out of basically the entire government." "Basically." Ron nodded slowly. He was quiet for a minute and then, "About time someone did." You don't have concerns." Hermione had concerns. Hermione always has concerns. That's her job. Ron stretched his legs out, crossing his ankles. "My concerns are simpler than hers. Can anyone stop you?" "No." "Will the people who deserve it get what's coming?" "Yes." "Are our people, the ones we care about, safe?" "The Weasleys don't sit on the Wizengamot. Your mum, your dad, none of them are affected." "Then I have no concerns." Ron turned his head to look at Harry. "You know Percy's been working at the ministry. He's been trying to reform things from inside. It's killing him. Every day he goes in and fights and nothing changes and he comes home looking like Dad did in the bad years. This'll free him from that. Harry hadn't thought about Percy. Hadn't thought about the hundreds of lower-level ministry employees who worked under a corrupt system, who tried their best within broken structures. After, Harry said, "We'll need people to rebuild. Good people. Percy's good people. Pain in the arse, but good people." They sat there in companionable silence, and Harry felt something he hadn't felt in months, since the war ended, really. Purpose. Direction. Not the desperate, reactive purpose of fighting Voldemort, of running and hiding and surviving. But chosen purpose. He was doing this because he could, because it was right, because nobody else would. The rings hummed against his fingers, warm and steady, and through them he could feel the distant pulse of the Wizengamot chamber waiting like a heart that had forgotten how to beat cleanly. 2 more days. The morning before the session, Harry woke early and found Daphne already in the kitchen, surrounded by parchment, quill moving rapidly. "Have you slept?" he asked. "Some." She didn't look up. "I'm writing contingency plans. If Malfoy moves to bar you from the chamber. If they try to call an emergency recess. If someone attacks you physically." Harry poured coffee and sat across from her. In the grey morning light, she looked less polished than her usual public persona, hair loose rather than pinned, no cosmetic charms, faint shadows under her eyes. She looked real. "What's that one?" He nodded at a separate piece of parchment, partially hidden under the others. She hesitated, then pulled it out. It was a letter. Addressed to her father. "I'm not going to send it," she said. "Not before. But, after. When he wakes up without magic. I want him to know that I knew. That I chose this. That it wasn't random, or unexpected, or something done to our family by an outsider." "He'll hate me," Harry said. "Probably. For a while." She set the letter aside. "He'll hate me more. I'm his daughter. He'll see it as betrayal." "Is it?" She looked at him directly. "It's the hardest thing I've ever done. But Astoria is 17 and the healers say she might not see 30 without a breakthrough in blood curse research. And every year, the Wizengamot blocks the funding, and every year, my father votes with them because that's the deal he made to keep us neutral and safe. So no. It's not betrayal. It's choosing which family member to save." Harry didn't know what to say to that. So he said, "After this is done, after we rebuild. Blood curse research gets funded. Fully. Whatever it takes." Daphne looked at him for a long time. Something shifted in her expression, not softening exactly, but opening. A door that had been closed, cracking open an inch. "Thank you," she said quietly. They sat in the kitchen as dawn turned to morning, drinking coffee and going over the plan one final time. Tomorrow, Harry would walk into the Wizengamot chamber wearing 4 rings that hadn't been united in 800 years. He would take his seats. He would invoke the reaffirmation. And when they failed, when they revealed themselves for what they were, he would end them. Not with violence. Not with dark magic. With their own broken promises turned back on them. The rings pulsed on his fingers. Ready. Tomorrow. Chapter 3, The Floor recognizes Lord Potter. Harry dressed carefully the morning of the session. Not in dress robes, he wasn't performing for anyone, but in good ones. Black, well-fitted, the kind of thing that said I belong here without trying too hard. He'd considered wearing the Potter family crest but decided against it. The rings would speak for themselves. All 4 of them. Today there was no hiding. He stood in front of the mirror in Grimmauld Place's master bedroom, and the reflection that looked back at him was different. Not physically, not really. Same unruly hair, same green eyes, same scar faded to a thin silver line. But something in the way he held himself had changed over the past 6 days. The rings had done that, or maybe the decision had. Certainty was its own kind of armor. "You look like you're going to war," Neville said from the doorway. "I am." "Yeah." Neville was dressed well too, his grandmother's influence, probably. Dark blue robes, the long-bottom crest at his collar. "Gran left an hour ago. She's already in the chamber," she said. He paused, a half-smile crossing his face. "She said to tell you not to dawdle and not to make a speech longer than 5 minutes because old people have bladder issues." Harry laughed. He needed that. "She's something else, your Gran. She's terrified, actually. She just hides it well." Neville came into the room, his expression sobering. "She believes in what you're doing. But she's been part of that body for 40 years. These are people she's worked alongside, argued with, shared meals with. Some of them were friends, once. I know. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying, understand what it costs, even for the people on our side." Harry nodded. That was what Neville did. He didn't argue, didn't try to stop you, just made sure you were seeing clearly. "I understand. Are you ready?" "Been ready since I was 14 and found out what they let happen to my parents." Neville straightened his cuffs. "Let's go." Downstairs, the team was assembled. Daphne in ice blue robes, her hair pulled back severely, looking like a weapon disguised as a socialite. Hermione in professional black, a satchel over her shoulder that Harry knew contained copies of every relevant legal document, just in case. Ron in dark green, wand visible at his hip, positioned like the soldier he'd become during the war. "The session starts at 10, Daphne said. "Public gallery opens at 9:30. "Hermione, Ron, you'll be in the gallery. Front row. I've arranged the seats." "What about you?" Harry asked. "I have a visitor's pass to the floor. Technically I'm there as a Greengrass family representative observing my father's seat." Something complicated flickered across her face. "I'll be positioned near the east exit in case anyone makes a run for it." "They can't run from this," Harry said. "The judgment affects anyone who's taken the oath, regardless of location. Once I invoke it, physical distance doesn't matter." "They don't know that. They'll panic. Panicking people are dangerous." She met his eyes. "Don't underestimate desperation." Harry nodded. "Let's go." The Ministry of Magic atrium was busy at 9:15 on a Wizengamot session day. Officials hurrying, memo airplanes zipping overhead, the great fountain, rebuilt after the war, now featuring all magical beings rather than wizards alone, splashing cheerfully. People noticed Harry immediately. They always did, the curse of fame, but today the stares lingered longer. The whispers were louder. He knew why. The rings were visible. The Potter ring, expected. The black ring, known. The Slytherin ring, people's eyes snagged on it, confusion and alarm mixing. And the fourth ring, the Emrys ring that seemed to shift and shimmer, that drew the eye and refused to let it go, that one caused actual stopping in the corridor. A witch carrying a stack of files walked directly into a pillar because she was staring at Harry's left hand. Good. Let them stare. Let them whisper. Let word travel ahead of him like a wave. He took the lift down to level 10, the Wizengamot chambers. The corridor was lined with old portraits, former chief warlocks who watched Harry pass with expressions ranging from curiosity to alarm. One of them, a severe-looking wizard from the 1600s, actually gasped. "Those rings," the portrait whispered. "Those rings together, it hasn't been, good lord, someone fetch." Harry walked past without pausing. The doors to the chamber were massive, 20 feet of dark wood carved with magical symbols, warded so heavily that even with his enhanced perception Harry couldn't see through them. 2 aurors stood guard, young ones, probably junior. They stiffened as Harry approached. "Lord Potter," one of them said. The session doesn't, I'm a seated member, Harry said. 4 times over. I'm entitled to early access to prepare my seat. The Aurors exchanged a look. The one who'd spoken reached for something, a communication mirror, probably, to check with a superior, but before he could, the doors moved. They swung open on their own. Not dramatically, not slamming, just opening. Welcoming. And Harry felt it, the magic of the chamber itself, ancient and vast, recognizing the rings, recognizing his authority, opening for him like a lock receiving a key. The Aurors stared. "Thank you," Harry said pleasantly, and walked through. The Wizengamot chamber was circular, tiered rows of seats rising around a central floor, all dark wood and purple hangings and the weight of centuries. It was empty, too early for most members, but it wasn't quiet. Harry could feel the magic of the place pressing against him from every direction. The oaths. Hundreds of years of oaths, sworn on this ground, bound into these walls. The magic remembered every single one. And the rings were alive now in a way they hadn't been before. All 4 of them vibrating, resonating with the chamber, connecting to something deep in the foundations. Harry felt like he'd plugged into a power grid. The threads he'd sensed since first putting on the rings, the ones connecting him to this place, were thick now, solid, thrumming with energy. He walked to the seats. The Potter seat was in the 3rd row, good position, central. The black seat was 2 rows up, near the outer edge. Both had small brass plaques with the family names. But there were 2 others, 2 seats that had no brass plaques because they'd been empty so long no one remembered to make them. The Slytherin seat was in the front row, far left. The Emrys seat was dead center of the front row, the highest position in the chamber, a seat that was subtly larger than the others, subtly more ornate, as though the craftsmen who'd built this place had known that whoever sat there would be more than ordinary. Harry touched the Emrys seat. The wood was warm. The magic of the chamber pulsed in response, a deep, resonant hum that he felt in his teeth. He sat down. The chamber recognized him. He felt it like a key turning, the wards adjusting, the ancient magic updating, incorporating him into its structure. The 4 seats were his. The 4 votes were his. And beneath that, deeper, the judgment waited. Patient. Ready to be called. Not yet. But soon. Harry sat in the Emrys seat in the center of the front row and waited for the Wizengamot to arrive. They came in 1s and 2s starting at 9:45. Ogden first, early as always according to Augusta, a creature of habit. He was already inside and settling into his seat with a cup of tea before he noticed Harry. The cup froze halfway to his lips. Tea sloshed over the rim onto his fingers. He didn't seem to notice. "What, who?" Ogden set the cup down with a clatter and stood, squinting across the chamber. "That seat is, nobody sits there." "That seat hasn't been, morning," Harry said. Ogden opened and closed his mouth several times. Then he turned and hurried out of the chamber, presumably to find someone to tell. After that, they arrived faster. Word was spreading. Harry watched them come in, watched their faces as they saw him. Some went pale. Some went red. Some stopped in the doorway and stared so long that the person behind them walked into their back. Malfoy arrived at 9:52. He walked in with perfect composure, his gaze sweeping the chamber as it always did, and landing on Harry. And stopping. Harry saw it, the moment Lucius understood. Not just that Harry was sitting in the Emrys seat, but what it meant. All 4 rings visible, the chamber's magic clearly resonating with him, the empty seats claimed. Lucius had done the same math Harry had done in Gringotts. 4 seats. The Founder's judgment. The endgame. Lucius's face went completely blank. Not his social mask, something deeper. The face of a man rapidly calculating survival odds. He went to his seat without speaking. Harry watched him pull a small piece of parchment from his robes and begin writing rapidly with a self-inking quill. Notes. Messages. Lucius was mobilizing whatever resources he could in the, Harry checked, 7 minutes before the session started. Good luck with that. Augusta Longbottom arrived and caught Harry's eye from her seat in the 4th row. The slightest nod. That was all. But it was enough. Dumbledore came last, at 9:59, as though he'd timed it. He entered the chamber and looked directly at Harry, and his expression was complicated. Resignation. Concern. And beneath both, something that might have been a very tired kind of hope. He sat in his own seat, 3rd row, near Augusta, and folded his hands in his lap and waited. The chief warlock, a witch named Thomasina Clearwater, who'd held the position since Dumbledore's removal in Harry's 5th year and had never given it back, stood at the podium in the center of the floor. She was 60-something, iron-haired, with the look of someone who'd been competent once and was now mostly concerned with maintaining procedure and not rocking anything. "This session of the Wizengamot will come to order," she said, her amplified voice filling the chamber. "Roll call, point of order." Harry's voice carried without amplification. The rings gave him that, the chamber itself amplified him because he was speaking with the authority of 4 seats. Clearwater stopped mid-word, her gaze snapping to him. "The chair recognizes," she faltered. Her eyes moved over the rings, over the seat he occupied, and her face went through several emotions very quickly. "The chair does not recognize, who, Harold James Potter. Lord of the most ancient and noble house of Potter. Lord of the most ancient and noble house of Black. Lord by right of conquest of the most ancient and noble house of Slytherin. Lord by blood and magic of the most ancient and primordial house of Emrys." He let each title land, felt the chamber's magic pulse with each one, confirming. "I claim my 4 seats. The magic of this chamber has already recognized my claim. I request formal acknowledgement for the record." Silence. Total silence. 52 witches and wizards, 51, minus him, staring. The public gallery above, where Hermione and Ron sat, had gone utterly still. Clearwater gripped her podium. "This is unprecedented. The Emrys seat has been vacant for 812 years. Yes. I'm aware." Harry didn't stand. He didn't need to. The seat gave him authority to speak from where he was. "The claim is verified by blood test at Gringotts, confirmed by magic, confirmed by this chamber's own wards. You felt it when I sat down. You all did." They had. He could see it in their faces, the awareness, the discomfort, the sense of something shifting beneath their feet. Clearwater looked around the chamber as though hoping someone would tell her what to do. Her eyes found Dumbledore, who said nothing. Found Malfoy, who was watching Harry with the intensity of a cornered animal calculating its next move. "I, the chair, if there are no formal objections to the claim, I object." Malfoy stood. Smooth, composed, voice perfectly modulated. "The claim to the Slytherin seat requires verification beyond a Gringotts test. Right of conquest is a disputed legal doctrine. It's not disputed," Harry said. "It's established law since 1247. Blackwood versus the Crown. The Wizengamot's own records confirm it. Unless you're suggesting the Wizengamot's own legal precedents don't apply." Malfoy's jaw tightened. "The Emrys claim is verified by the chamber itself. The seat accepted me. The wards recognize me. You're arguing with the magic of this building, Malfoy, not with me." "I request a recess to review." "Denied," Clearwater said, and she looked slightly surprised at herself for saying it. But the chamber's magic was pressing on her too, Harry could feel it. The building wanted this. The ancient magic was tired of empty seats and broken oaths. It wanted to be whole. Lord Potter's claim is, the chamber has recognized, the seats are his. 4 seats. Acknowledged. A murmur ran through the chamber like wind through grass. Harry could see alliances shifting in real time, eyes meeting, tiny nods, subtle shakes of heads. The political landscape was rearranging itself around the new reality. Malfoy sat back down. His expression was controlled, but Harry saw his hand move beneath his robes, the forearm holster Augusta had mentioned. Checking his secondary wand. Preparing. With the acknowledgement of Lord Potter's seats, Clearwater said, sounding like she was reading from a script she was writing in real time, we will proceed with today's agenda. First item, point of order, Harry said again. Clearwater closed her eyes briefly. The floor recognizes Lord Potter. I invoke the right of reaffirmation. The chamber went cold. Not physically, or maybe physically, Harry couldn't tell. But the magic responded to those words, surging, the oaths in the walls and seats and floor activating, trembling like strings about to be plucked. I don't, Clearwater's voice faltered. I'm not familiar with, it's in the founding charter. Harry spoke clearly, each word precise. Any lord holding seats from 2 or more founding lines may invoke the right of reaffirmation at any full session. It requires all seated members to restate their oaths of office. It's a test of magical integrity. It's been invoked 3 times in the Wizengamot's history, the last time in 1203. This is absurd, someone said. Parkinson, Harry thought, a thick-necked wizard in expensive robes. We don't have to submit to archaic. You swore an oath when you took your seat, Harry said, and now he did stand. The chamber's magic rose with him. He could feel it flooding through him, amplifying not just his voice but his presence. Every single person in this chamber swore a magical oath to serve justly, to judge fairly, to place the good of the magical community above personal gain. I'm asking you to say it again. That's all. Just say the words again. He paused. Let it settle. Unless, he said, you can't. The silence was excruciating. Harry could feel the fear in the room, not from everyone, but from enough. From the ones who knew. From the ones who understood exactly what would happen if they tried to restate oaths they'd broken. Their magic would reject the words. The oath would try to rebind and find nothing to bind to. They would be exposed. Malfoy stood again. This is a power grab. Nothing more. Lord Potter is attempting to use obscure procedural relics to intimidate. Restate your oath, Lord Malfoy. Harry's voice was quiet. If you've kept it, it costs you nothing. 5 seconds of your time. Say the words and sit down. Unless you're afraid. The word hung in the air. Afraid. Lucius Malfoy's face went perfectly, carefully still. I am not afraid of a boy with delusions of, then say the words. Malfoy's mouth opened. And closed. And Harry watched, everyone watched, as the most powerful political operator in Wizarding Britain stood in the Wizengamot chamber and couldn't speak. Not because he was choosing not to. Because the magic wouldn't let him form the words. The oath knew. His own magic knew what he'd done, what he'd broken, and it would not let him pretend otherwise. The silence stretched for 3 seconds. 5. 10. Malfoy sat down. He didn't say another word. Would anyone else like to restate their oath? Harry asked the chamber. Augusta Longbottom stood. Her voice rang clear and strong. I swear upon my magic to serve justly, to judge fairly, and to place the good of the magical community above my own gain. So I have sworn. So it remains. Light flared around her, golden, clean, the magic accepting and affirming. The oath was intact. Thank you, Lady Longbottom, Harry said. Another member stood, Griselda Marchbanks, trembling. She opened her mouth and managed, I swear upon my magic to serve, and then she choked. The words wouldn't come. She gasped, pressed a hand to her chest, and sat down heavily. Someone beside her reached out, but she pushed them away. One by one, they tried. Or didn't. Some sat in their seats and refused to speak, silent acknowledgments of guilt. Some tried and failed, the magic exposing them in front of everyone, in front of the public gallery, in front of the court reporters whose quills scratched frantically across parchment. 8 members successfully restated their oaths. 8 out of 52. Augusta. Amelia Bones. A young witch named Sylvia Fawcett who'd only been seated for 3 months. An elderly wizard called Alderton who'd voted against every popular measure for decades and been despised for it. Turns out he'd been the only honest holdout in a sea of corruption. A few others. 8. Dumbledore was one of the last to stand. The chamber went very still. Harry felt his own breath catch, though he didn't let it show. "I swear upon my magic to serve justly," Dumbledore said. His voice was steady but soft. "To judge fairly. And to place the good of the magical community above my own gain." A pause. A long pause. Then, light. Not as bright as Augusta's, not as clean. It flickered, wavered. But it held. The oath accepted him. Barely. On the thinnest edge of what the magic considered keeping faith. But it held. Dumbledore sat down. He looked at Harry, and Harry nodded. Once. 9, then. 9 who survived. 43 who hadn't spoken or couldn't. "Let the record show," Harry said, "that 43 members of this body have either refused or been unable to reaffirm the oaths they swore upon taking their seats. 43 members who have violated the fundamental trust placed in them by the magical community. You have no authority to." Parkinson was on his feet, face purpling. "This is a farce, a circus, you can't just, what happens now?" That was Amelia Bones. She stood in her seat, calm, her voice cutting through the panic like a blade. She was looking directly at Harry, and her expression said she knew exactly what came next and was asking not because she didn't know but because she wanted it on the record. "Lord Potter. What happens now?" Harry took a breath. This was it. The moment. 6 days of preparation, a lifetime of injustice, and now, this. "What happens now," he said, "is the Founder's judgment." He raised his hands. All 4 rings blazed, ruby, obsidian, emerald, and starlight. The chamber's magic surged upward from the foundations, from the oaths woven into the stone, from centuries of broken promises stored and remembered by magic that did not forget. "I, Harold James Potter, Lord of Potter, Black, Slytherin, and Emrys, invoke the Founder's judgment upon this body. By the authority of the 4 founding lines and the line of Merlin that stands above them, I call upon the magic of the oaths to judge those who have broken them." The chamber exploded in chaos. Not literally, nothing broke, nothing burned. But the magic erupted. Light poured from the walls, from the seats, from the floor, golden light, the same light that had confirmed Augusta's oath, but vast now, filling the entire chamber like a sunrise inside a room. And Harry could feel it, could feel the judgment spreading outward like a wave, touching every person in the chamber, testing them, weighing them. People screamed. Not in pain, not yet, but in shock, in terror, as the light touched them and they felt what it was doing. Feeling the connection between their magic and their oaths, feeling the judgment examine that connection, finding the frays and breaks and betrayals. "Stop this." Malfoy was on his feet, wand in hand, the hidden one from his forearm holster. "Stop," he fired something at Harry. A curse, dark, vicious, the kind of magic that had no legal use. It crossed the chamber trailing green light, and dissolved. 3 feet from Harry, it simply ceased to exist, unmade by the combined protective magic of 4 ancient houses. Harry didn't even flinch. He barely noticed it. The judgment was flowing through him like a river and he was the channel, not the source, directing power that was older than anyone in this room. The light brightened. And then, it happened. The first one to fall was Parkinson. He made a sound, a horrible, guttural sound like something vital being torn away, and collapsed forward in his seat, hands clawing at his chest. His magic, Harry could see it, could see everyone's magic now, was being pulled away from him. Not violently. Methodically. The oath magic was reclaiming what had been given conditionally and whose conditions had been violated. It was taking back the magic that should have been used in service and had been used for corruption instead. Parkinson slumped. His eyes went glassy. And Harry felt it, felt the connection between Parkinson and his magic sever completely. Cleanly. Permanently. A squib. Parkinson was a squib now. Then not. Then Avery. Then Selwyn. One by one, the golden light found them, tested them, judged them. And one by one, their magic was stripped away, pulled from them like thread from a spool, unwound, returned to the ambient magic of the world. Some screamed. Some wept. Some tried to run. Raoul made it 3 steps toward the door before the judgment caught him and he dropped like a puppet with cut strings. Malfoy lasted longest. Of course he did. His magic fought, Harry could feel it fighting, could feel Lucius pouring everything he had into resisting, his will iron hard, his desperation absolute. But the judgment wasn't a spell that could be resisted. It was the magic of the oaths themselves, the fundamental contract that every member had agreed to, activating its penalty clause. You could no more resist it than you could resist gravity by being determined. Lucius made a sound when it took him. Not a scream, a gasp. Short, sharp, bitten off. His knees buckled. He caught himself on the seat in front of him, knuckles white, and for one moment his eyes met Harry's across the chamber and there was something in them, rage, yes, and hatred, but also a terrible, bottomless disbelief. This wasn't supposed to happen. This wasn't how power worked. He'd spent his entire life mastering a system that was supposed to be unassailable, and a 17-year-old boy had just torn it apart with the system's own rules. Then his eyes went flat. His magic was gone. He released the seat and sat down slowly, mechanically, staring at nothing. 43. The light faded. The chamber was quiet now, not peaceful quiet, but the quiet of aftermath. The quiet of a battlefield. Some of the stripped members were unconscious. Some were weeping silently. Some sat rigid in their seats, staring at their hands as though expecting them to belong to someone else. Harry lowered his hands. The rings were still glowing faintly, cooling down, but the judgment was complete. He could feel it, could feel the clean, clear, empty spaces where 43 corrupted magical connections had been severed. It was done. Let the record show, Harry said, and his voice was steady despite the enormity of what had just happened, that the Founder's judgment has been carried out. 43 members of the Wizengamot have been found in violation of their sworn oaths and have been stripped of their magic accordingly. The remaining 9 members retain their seats and their magic, their oaths confirmed intact. Nobody spoke. The court reporters' quills had stopped moving. In the gallery, Harry could see Hermione with both hands over her mouth, Ron beside her looking pale but set, and around them, spectators frozen in shock. Amelia Bones was the first to move. She stood, slowly, and looked around the chamber at the devastation, at her former colleagues slumped and broken and stripped of everything they'd taken for granted. Then she looked at Harry. "What happens now?" she asked. The same question as before. But different now. "Now," Harry said, "we rebuild." The explosion came from outside. Harry felt it before he heard it, a shock through the wards of the building, something hitting the Ministry's external defenses with enormous force. The chandelier in the chamber swung. Dust filtered from the ceiling. What? Clearwater started, emerging from what seemed to be a state of shock. A second explosion. Closer. The doors to the chamber shuddered. "Harry." That was Neville's voice. He was on his feet in the gallery where he'd been watching, wand out, moving toward the stairs. "That's not structural. Someone's attacking." Harry felt it through the rings, felt the ministry's wards buckling under assault. Coordinated assault. Multiple points of attack. This wasn't panic or retaliation from the stripped members, they had no magic left to attack with. This was something prepared. Something ready. Malfoy, Harry said. He looked at Lucius, slumped in his seat, magic gone, eyes dead. But his right hand was in his pocket. Holding something. What did you do? Lucius looked up at him, and despite everything, despite being a squib now, despite having lost everything, he smiled. It was a terrible smile. Empty and vicious. Did you think, Lucius said, his voice barely above a whisper, that I wouldn't have a contingency? The doors blew open. They weren't Death Eaters were done, most of them dead or imprisoned. These were mercenaries. Harry could see it in the way they moved, professional, coordinated, foreign. Eastern European, maybe, or Scandinavian. 12 of them, heavily armed, warded robes, faces obscured. They poured through the shattered doors and fanned out with military precision. The lead one raised a wand, not aiming at Harry. Aiming at the stripped members. At the helpless, magicless former wizards and witches who couldn't defend themselves. Harry understood. Malfoy's contingency wasn't to save himself. It was revenge. If I fall, everyone falls. Kill the witnesses. Kill the stripped. Create chaos so massive that whatever Harry had done would be lost in the bloodshed. Harry moved. He didn't think about it. Didn't calculate. The power of 4 houses surged through him like lightning finding ground, and he threw out his hand, no wand, no incantation, and a wall of force slammed into the mercenaries like a physical thing. 3 of them went flying backward through the broken doors. The others braced, wards flaring, and kept coming. Protect the members. Harry shouted, and Amelia Bones was already moving, her wand drawing defensive wards in the air. Augusta had her wand out too, and the other surviving members, the 9 whose magic was intact, were forming a perimeter. Neville hit the floor of the chamber running, wand blazing. He caught a mercenary with a stunner that punched through the man's wards like paper, and Harry realized, the judgment hadn't just stripped the corrupt. It had strengthened the clean. The ambient magic that had been locked up in broken oaths for decades was free now, flowing back into the world, and the people whose magic was intact were drinking it in like rain after drought. A curse streaked toward Harry, something dark and spiraling, and he caught it. Actually caught it, the rings absorbing the magic, converting it, feeding it back into his reserves. The mercenary who'd fired it stared. Bad choice, Harry said, and unleashed the power back tenfold. The mercenary's wards shattered. His wand arm snapped backward, wand flying free. He hit the wall hard enough to crack the stone and slid down, unconscious. Another one came at him from the right, clever, trying to flank, and Harry felt him coming because the chamber was his now, every stone and ward and atom of magic in this building connected to him through the rings, and he spun and the floor opened beneath the mercenary's feet, not a pit, just a sudden absence of solidity that swallowed the man to his waist and then solidified again, trapping him. Neville was holding the east side. 2 mercenaries pressed him, firing in tandem, and Neville, who'd faced Nagini alone, who'd stood against Voldemort when everyone else was frozen, fought like a man possessed. His shield work was extraordinary, his counterattacks precise, and when one of the mercenaries got too close, Neville hit him with a blasting hex that launched the man into the chamber ceiling. Augusta was protecting a cluster of stripped members who couldn't protect themselves, shielding them with magic that blazed white-hot, her old frame suddenly straightened, her eyes fierce. Behind me, she barked at the former Wizengamot members who were stumbling, confused, terrified. Move, you fools. The lead mercenary, the biggest one, the most warded, was heading for Lucius. Not to kill him, to extract him. Harry realized it a second late. This was a 2-part plan, attack to create chaos, extract Lucius in the confusion. Harry Operat. Inside the chamber, which should have been impossible, anti-apparition wards, but the chamber was his and its wards were his and they parted for him like water. He materialized between the mercenary and Malfoy, close enough to see the man's eyes widen behind his mask. "No," Harry said. He didn't need a spell. The chamber's magic responded to his will. The stones beneath the mercenary's feet erupted upward, encasing the man from the knees down. The walls reached out, literally reached, the stone flowing like liquid, and wrapped around his arms. In 3 seconds, the mercenary leader was entombed up to his neck in the living stone of the Wizengamot chamber. Harry turned to the remaining attackers. 5 still standing. They were looking at him, at what he'd just done, and Harry could see the calculation in their eyes. They were professionals. They knew when a job had gone wrong. "Leave," Harry said. "Or I bring the building down on you." He could. They could see he could. The chamber hummed with his power, the rings blazing, the ancient magic of the place singing in harmony with his intent. He was the lord of this place in a way nobody had been in centuries, and the building knew it and responded to him like an extension of his body. The 5 remaining mercenaries looked at each other. Exchanged some signal Harry couldn't read. And disapparated, or tried to. The anti-apparition wards caught 3 of them. Harry let the other 2 go. They'd run far enough. The 3 who couldn't escape dropped their wands and raised their hands. "Aurors." Amelia Bones's voice, sharp and commanding. Ministry Aurors were finally arriving, pouring through the broken doors, late, too late, but here. "Secure the prisoners. Healers to the chamber." Harry let the chaos flow around him. The fight was over, had lasted maybe 90 seconds, though it felt longer. He turned back to Lucius. Malfoy sat in his seat, unmoved, unharmed. The mercenary had failed to reach him. Lucius looked up at Harry, and that terrible smile was gone. In its place was something raw. Naked. "You think this changes anything?" Lucius whispered. "You think taking our magic makes us powerless? I have gold. I have connections. I have leverage in 6 countries. This isn't over." Harry crouched down to be at eye level. The rings pulsed softly, for colors reflecting in Lucius's gray eyes. "It's over," Harry said. "Your gold is in a goblin bank, and the goblins work with me now. Your connections are to people who just watched you lose everything in front of witnesses. Your leverage relies on fear, and nobody's afraid of a squib." Lucius's face contorted, hate, raw and unfiltered, more honest than anything Harry had ever seen from him. "You arrogant child. You don't know what you've done. You've destroyed the entire system." "Yes," Harry said. "That was the point." He stood and walked away. Behind him, Aurors were moving in to secure the chamber. Healers were checking on the stripped members. Physically they were fine, would be fine, just magicless. The mercenaries were being bound and taken into custody. Order was asserting itself over chaos, as it does. Neville found him at the edge of the chamber floor. He had a cut over one eyebrow, nothing serious, and he was breathing hard, wand still in hand. "Everyone okay?" Harry asked. "Our side, yeah. Some bruises. Augusta's fine, she's terrifying. By the way, I watched her duel 2 of them at once." He paused. "It worked, Harry. The judgment. It actually worked." "Yeah." Harry looked out over the chamber, at the devastation, at the broken doors, at the 43 former wizards sitting in their seats stripped of everything. At the 9 who remained, standing, magic intact, already beginning to talk to each other about what came next. "Yeah, it worked." Hermione was fighting her way down from the gallery, Ron right behind her. She reached Harry and threw her arms around him, brief, fierce, then pulled back. "You absolute madman. You actually did it. I told you I would." "I know, but hearing it and watching it are different things." She looked around, her analytical mind already working. Harry, the legal implications, the international response, we need to get ahead of the narrative before the prophet, breathed Hermione. Ron put a hand on Harry's shoulder. You good, mate? I'm good. He was. The rings were settling, their energy calming now that the judgment was complete and the fight was over. The chamber's magic hummed contentedly around him, cleaner now, lighter, as though a poison had been drawn from its veins. Daphne appeared at his elbow. She was unhurt, she'd positioned herself well, out of the line of fire, but her ice-blue robes had stone dust on the hem and her expression was tight. We need to go, she said. Now. Before the reporters, too late. The doors, the broken ones, were already crowded with people. Reporters, ministry officials, members of the public who'd heard the explosions. And at the front of the crowd, Quill already scratching across parchment, a face Harry recognized. Rita Skeeter. Of course. Lord Potter, she called, her voice cutting through the noise. Lord Potter, is it true that you've stripped the entire Wizengamot of their magic? Is this a coup? Are you declaring yourself? Press conference tomorrow, Daphne said, stepping smoothly between Harry and the crowd. Lord Potter will issue a full statement. No questions today. She steered Harry toward a side exit, one of the ones Augusta had told them about. Neville flanked them. Ron and Hermione fell in behind. As they moved through the back corridors of the ministry, Harry could hear the chaos growing behind them, shouts, questions, the sound of a world reshaping itself. He could feel it too, through the rings, the ripples spreading outward from what he'd done, the shock wave traveling through magical Britain like a stone dropped in still water. It was done. The Wizengamot was broken. The corrupt were stripped. The path was clear for something new. And Lucius Malfoy's words echoed in his mind, this isn't over. Maybe not. But whatever came next, Harry was ready. For rings hummed on his fingers, the power of 8 centuries at his command, and he was done, completely, utterly done, letting broken people run a broken world. Whatever came next, he would face it standing up. Chapter 4, Judgment. The first 24 hours after the judgment were chaos. Not the violent kind, that was over, the mercenaries in custody, the chamber sealed for investigation. This was the slower, messier chaos of a world trying to understand what had happened to it. Owls flooded Grimmauld Place by the hundreds, howlers, death threats, pleas for mercy, congratulations, interview requests, marriage proposals. Harry stopped opening them after the first hour and let the house elf creature sort them into piles, dangerous, irrelevant, and potentially useful. The Daily Prophet's evening edition had 3-inch headlines, Potter strips Wizengamot of magic, entire government in ruins. Rita Skeeter's article was surprisingly restrained, probably because the facts were dramatic enough without embellishment. The Quibbler ran a special edition with the headline Harry Potter does what everyone's been thinking and sold out within an hour. The international response was immediate. The ICW called an emergency session. The French ministry issued a statement expressing deep concern. The American MACUSA was reportedly monitoring the situation. None of them did anything concrete, because none of them had jurisdiction, and because, as Daphne pointed out while reading the diplomatic cables she'd somehow acquired, nobody wanted to pick a fight with a wizard who just single-handedly dismantled an entire government and defeated 12 professional mercenaries without breaking a sweat. They're afraid of you, she said, tossing a cable from the Bulgarian ministry onto the growing pile. Good. I don't want people to be afraid of me. Too late for that. What you can control is what kind of afraid. Right now they're afraid because they don't know what you'll do next. Once you show them, once you demonstrate that you're rebuilding, not conquering, the fear becomes respect. She picked up another cable. The German ministry is already asking about trade negotiations. They hated dealing with the old Wizengamot. Apparently Malfoy blocked a potions ingredients agreement in 1991 because it would have cut into his personal monopoly. Harry rubbed his face. He'd barely slept. The rings wouldn't let him, not painfully, not invasively, but there was a low constant hum of awareness now, the chamber's magic connected to him like a phantom limb. He could feel the building even from here, could feel the wards being repaired, could feel the empty seats waiting. "The press conference," he said. "What time?" 2 o'clock. Ministry atrium. "I've arranged it with Amelia, she's acting as interim head of government until we establish something new. She's competent, she's clean, and she's cooperative." Daphne set down the cables and turned to face him fully. "Harry. You need to sleep. I know. I mean now. For at least 4 hours. I'll handle things until then. Hermione's working on the legal framework for the transitional government. Neville's with Augusta coordinating the remaining 9 members. Ron is," she glanced out the window. "I think Ron is in the kitchen eating everything in sight, which is fair because stress eating is a valid coping mechanism." Harry almost smiled. "You've got this handled. I've had contingency plans for this phase since day 3. She pointed at the stairs. "Sleep. I'll wake you at noon." He went. Not because she told him to, because she was right, and because the bone-deep exhaustion was starting to blur his thoughts. He climbed the stairs of Grimmauld Place, the old house creaking familiarly around him, and fell into bed still wearing his robes. The rings pulsed gently against his fingers, soothing now rather than alert, and sleep took him between one breath and the next. He dreamed of the chamber. Not the chaos, not the mercenaries or the screaming or the light. He dreamed of it empty. Silent. The seats arranged in their circular tiers, the purple hangings still, the ancient wood gleaming. And in the dream, the seats weren't empty. They were occupied by ghosts, or not ghosts. Memories. Impressions left in the magic over centuries. He could see them all, every witch and wizard who'd ever sat in that chamber, layered over each other like images on overexposed film. The ones who'd kept their oaths shone. The ones who hadn't were dim, faded, as though the magic had already begun forgetting them. And in the center of the chamber, standing where the chief warlock's podium would be, a figure. Tall. Old in the way that mountains are old. Wearing robes that seemed to be made of the same shifting starlight as the Emrys ring. His face was obscured, not invisible, just too much to look at directly, like trying to stare at the sun. "You did well," the figure said, and its voice was everywhere and nowhere. "Better than I expected." "Merlin," Harry said. In the dream, the word felt natural. A shadow of a shadow. An echo left in the rings for whoever might wear them next. The figure moved, drifted, circling the empty chamber. The judgment was designed as a last resort. "I never thought it would take 8 centuries to be used. I thought," a sound like a laugh. "I thought surely, within a generation or 2, someone would notice the rot and invoke it. I underestimated human capacity for tolerating corruption when it benefits them." "It's done now," Harry said. "Done? No. Breaking is easy. Any fool can break." The figure turned toward him, and for a moment, just a flash, Harry saw a face. Old, sharp, kind in the way that a surgeon's knife is kind. "Building is the work. Building is what will define you. What will you make, Lord Potter? What will you put in place of what you've torn down? Something better. Everyone says that. Be specific." Harry opened his mouth to answer, and woke up. Noon light was streaming through the windows, and Daphne was knocking on his door. "It's 12. The press conference is in 2 hours. Hermione has a draft of your statement." Harry lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling. Be specific. Right. He could do that. He got up. The ministry atrium was packed. Not just reporters, though there were plenty of those, from every major wizarding publication in Europe, but citizens. Regular witches and wizards who'd come to see, to hear, to understand what was happening to their world. The atrium was the largest open space in the ministry, and it was standing room only. Harry could see faces stretching back into the corridor, people standing on the fountain's edge for a better view. A podium had been set up near the center, warded for security. Amelia Bones stood to one side, flanked by 4 Aurors, Real security this time, not the junior ones from yesterday. Neville was there too, and Augusta, and the other surviving Wizengamot members. Daphne stood just behind the podium, invisible to the crowd but positioned where Harry could see her. He walked to the podium. The crowd noise dropped, not to silence, but to a focused murmur. Every eye on him. Every quill poised. Harry didn't use notes. Hermione had written him a statement, thorough, careful, legally precise, and he'd read it, appreciated it, and set it aside. This needed to come from him. In his words. His voice. Yesterday, he said, I invoked the Founder's judgment on the Wizengamot. 43 members were stripped of their magic. I did this openly, publicly, with witnesses. I'm not going to apologize for it, and I'm not going to pretend it was anything other than what it was. He let that settle. The quills scratched. For those of you who don't know the history, the Wizengamot was built on oaths. Real ones. Magical ones. Every member, when they took their seat, swore to serve justly. To judge fairly. To put the community above themselves. Those weren't just words. They were binding magical contracts with real consequences. The Founder's judgment was the enforcement mechanism, the failsafe built in by Merlin and the Founders for when those oaths were broken. He paused. Looked out over the crowd. It took 800 years for someone to pull the trigger. It shouldn't have taken that long. Lord Potter. A reporter, not Skeeter, someone from a continental paper. Are you declaring yourself leader of magical Britain? No. I'm not a politician. I don't want to run a government. What I did yesterday was demolition, tearing down a structure that was rotten from foundation to roof. The rebuilding is going to be done by people who actually know how to govern. Amelia Bones has agreed to serve as interim head of state. The 9 surviving Wizengamot members will form a transitional council. And within 6 months, we will hold open elections for a new governing body, one with actual accountability mechanisms, actual transparency, and actual consequences for corruption. What about the people you stripped? Another reporter. 43 witches and wizards are now squibs. Is that not cruel? Disproportionate? Harry had expected this question. Had thought about it carefully. Those 43 people used their magic to enable murder. To acquit murderers. To block justice. To sell their votes while people suffered and died. His voice was level. Sirius Black spent 12 years in Azkaban without a trial because those people couldn't be bothered to do their jobs. Voldemort returned and built an army because those people chose to look the other way for political convenience. Children died at Hogwarts because those people spent years pretending the threat wasn't real. He leaned into the podium. Their magic was given to them conditionally, just like all of ours. The condition was that they use it responsibly when they sat in those seats. They didn't. The magic was reclaimed. That's not cruelty. That's consequences. But permanent, their choices were permanent too. The people they let die aren't coming back. The reporter sat down. More questions came, rapid fire, from every direction. Harry answered them clearly, directly, without hedging. Yes, he held 4 seats. No, he wasn't keeping them permanently. He would retain them through the transition period and then the new system would determine how hereditary seats worked, or whether they existed at all. Yes, the goblins had verified his claims. Yes, the chamber's magic itself had confirmed the judgment. No, he didn't feel guilty. No, he wasn't worried about international response. The ICW has called an emergency session. The ICW can discuss whatever they want. They have no jurisdiction over internal British magical governance. If they'd like to discuss their own Wizengamot equivalents and whether similar corruption exists in their own governments, Harry smiled slightly. I imagine several delegates will find that conversation uncomfortable. A ripple of laughter from the crowd. Not the reporters, the citizens. The regular people who'd lived under the Wizengamot's corruption for years and never had anyone acknowledge it so bluntly. Lord Potter. This time it was Skeeter, her acid green quill hovering. You mentioned Amelia Bones and a transitional council. But you hold the real power here, for lordship rings, the authority of the founder's judgment. What guarantees can you offer that you won't simply use that power to install yourself as what? A dictator? Harry met her eyes. Rita, I'm 17 years old. I spent 6 years fighting a war I shouldn't have had to fight because the adults in the room failed at every turn. I have no interest in ruling anyone. What I have is the ability to ensure that whoever comes next actually serves the people instead of themselves. The rings give me oversight. If the new system rots like the old one, I can invoke the judgment again. That's not dictatorship. That's a fire alarm. And if you rot, then someone better than me will have to stop me. He said it without arrogance, simply, as a statement of fact. But I won't. And here's why, because I don't want power. I never have. I want to sleep through the night without worrying about who's being sold out in a back room. I want Muggleborn kids to get the same opportunities as pure-blood ones. I want my friends' parents to be avenged by a system that should have protected them decades ago. That's what I want. And once I have it, I'll be happy to go back to anonymity. He stepped back from the podium. That's all for today. Further statements will come from Interim Director Bones and the Transitional Council. Thank you. He walked away from the podium into a wall of noise, shouted questions, cheering, the pop of flashbulbs, and Daphne fell into step beside him, guiding him toward the secure corridor behind the atrium. Well done, she said quietly. The fire alarm line was good. Did you practice that? Made it up. Of course you did. She pushed open a door into a quiet hallway, and the noise cut off behind them as security wards engaged. Amelia wants to meet tonight. Her, the remaining members, you and your people. We need to start actually planning the transitional structure. Yeah. Harry rolled his shoulders, tension releasing now that the public performance was over. Daphne. Your father. Have you? Her step faltered. Just barely. I went to see him this morning. At St. Mungo's. They're keeping the stripped members for observation. Physically they're fine, but there are psychological evaluations and, she stopped walking. Stood very still in the corridor, one hand against the wall, and Harry saw her compose herself. The process was visible, the tightening of her jaw, the straightening of her spine, the careful blanking of her expression. He didn't speak to me. He looked at me and he knew, he could tell, somehow. That I'd known. He didn't say a word. Harry didn't know what to say. He reached out and put a hand on her shoulder, and she let him. For just a moment, 3 seconds, maybe 4, she leaned into the contact. Then she straightened, and she was Daphne again, composed and sharp. It's done, she said. I made my choice. Now I live with it. You saved your sister. I know. She started walking again. Come on. We have work to do. The Transitional Council met that evening in a conference room at the Ministry, one of the secure ones on level 2, warded and swept for listening charms. Around the table, Harry, Amelia Bones, Augusta Longbottom, the 7 other surviving members, Daphne as Harry's political advisor, Hermione as legal counsel, and Neville because Harry wanted him there and nobody was going to argue. First order of business, Amelia said. She'd taken the head of the table naturally, she was good at authority, comfortable with it. Governance structure. We need something functional within the week, or the vacuum will start causing problems. Trade agreements, law enforcement, basic administration, the ministry still functions, but it needs someone with legal authority to sign off on things. The 9 of us can serve as an interim legislative body, Augusta said. Small enough to be efficient. Large enough to prevent any one person from dominating. Agreed, Amelia said. Harry, you hold 4 seats. How do you want to handle that? I'll vote on major issues. Day-to-day governance, I trust the council to handle. He looked around the table. I'm not here to micromanage. I'm here as a failsafe. You govern. I make sure it stays clean. The surviving members exchanged glances, some relieved, some wary. Alderton, the elderly contrarian who'd been despised for decades for his principled no votes, spoke for the first time. And if we disagree with you? If the council passes something you don't like? Then you pass it and I deal with it, Harry said. I'm not claiming veto power over policy. The only thing I'm watching for is corruption. If you vote for something I think is stupid but you genuinely believe it serves the community, that's democracy. That's fine. What I won't tolerate is what came before. The backroom deals. The bought votes. The deliberate sabotage of legislation for personal gain. Alderton studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Acceptable. I've been waiting 40 years for someone to draw that line. The election timeline, Hermione said, pulling them back to practicalities. She had a massive stack of parchment in front of her, proposed structures, historical precedents, comparative analyses of other magical governments. 6 months is ambitious but achievable. We need to determine who can stand for election, what the new body looks like, how seats are allocated. No hereditary seats, Harry said. Everyone looked at him. I know what I'm saying. I hold 4 hereditary seats and I'm telling you the new system shouldn't have them. The old system gave power based on blood. That's how we got where we were. The new system should give power based on something else. Merit. Election. Appointment by consensus. Something that can't be inherited by someone who hasn't earned it. Silence. Then Augusta laughed, a short, sharp bark. The lord of 4 ancient houses wants to abolish lordship. If that isn't proof of character, I don't know what is. I'm not abolishing the houses, Harry said. The family names, the legacies, the wealth, that stays. I'm abolishing the automatic political power that comes with them. A Malfoy can still be a Malfoy. They just can't sit in the Wizengamot purely because their last name is Malfoy. That will be unpopular with some families, Daphne said. Not arguing, flagging. Everything we're doing is unpopular with some families. The families it's unpopular with are the ones who've been using inherited power to oppress everyone else for centuries. I'll add it to the proposal, Hermione said, making a note. Elected body. No hereditary seats. Open to all magical citizens regardless of blood status. She looked up. Should there be a minimum age? Educational requirement? The discussion continued for 3 hours. Harry let it flow. This was the work, the detailed unglamorous labor of building something from scratch. Hermione thrived in it. Amelia was pragmatic and efficient. Augusta contributed institutional knowledge, what had worked, historically, what hadn't. Even the quieter surviving members found their voices as the conversation continued, offering perspectives Harry wouldn't have considered. They didn't finish, weren't close to finishing, but by the end of the evening they had a framework. An interim government structure. A timeline for elections. A list of immediate priorities, criminal trials for the mercenaries, international diplomatic outreach, restoration of basic services, establishment of an independent judicial body. And Malfoy? Ron said. He'd been quiet most of the meeting, politics wasn't his arena, but this was. His contingency plan yesterday. 12 professional mercenaries, pre-positioned, activated by signal. That's not something you put together overnight. He planned this. He's a squib now, one of the council members said. What threat can he's a squib with a fortune, connections in half the pure-blood families in Europe, and a proven willingness to use violence, Daphne said sharply. Don't underestimate him because his magic is gone. His magic was never his most dangerous weapon. His mind was. He said something to me, Harry said. Everyone looked at him. After the judgment. He said he had gold, connections, leverage in 6 countries. He said it wasn't over. We should freeze his assets, Amelia said. On what grounds? Hermione asked. He's been stripped of magic, not convicted of a crime. The judgment isn't a legal sentence, it's a magical consequence. To freeze his assets we'd need a criminal proceeding. Then we start one, Amelia said. He ordered the mercenary attack. That's conspiracy to commit murder, at minimum. 12 counts of attempted murder. Destruction of ministry property. I can have charges filed by morning. Do it, Harry said. But even as he said it, something nagged at him. Malfoy's smile in the chamber. Not the smile of a man who'd lost everything, the smile of a man who'd planned for this outcome. Who had more moves on the board than anyone could see. What did you do, Lucius? What did you prepare that we haven't found yet? 3 days passed. The world didn't end. It felt like it should have, like the removal of an entire government should have caused some kind of catastrophic collapse, but magical Britain turned out to be more resilient than its leaders had given it credit for. Shops stayed open. Gringotts functioned normally. Hogwarts, with the new term approaching, continued its repairs under McGonagall's steady hand. The trains ran. The post owls flew. It turned out that most of the actual work of running a society had always been done by the lower-level ministry employees, the civil servants, the people who'd never been corrupted because no one had bothered to corrupt them. They kept working. Kept the wheels turning. And without the Wizengamot blocking and meddling and siphoning off resources, some things actually got easier. Werewolf protection legislation, Hermione said on the 3rd day, slapping a document on the kitchen table at Grimmauld Place where they'd been working from. Passed unanimously by the interim council this morning. 37 years it was blocked. The original sponsor was Lyle Lupin, Remus's father. He proposed it in 1961. Good, Harry said. Blood curse research funding. Another document. Approved. Full funding. Department of Mysteries is already assembling a team. Harry looked at Daphne across the table. She was reading something else, but she'd heard. Her hand had gone still on the page. She didn't look up, but her throat moved, a swallow, and she said, very quietly, thank you. House Elf rights legislation is next, Hermione continued. I'm not letting this momentum slow down. While we have a council that's actually willing to, Hermione. Ron, from the doorway. His voice was strange. Tight. Something's wrong. Everyone looked up. Ron was holding a communication mirror, standard Auror issue. Harry knew Amelia had given him one for coordination purposes. His face was pale. It's Malfoy, Ron said. He's gone. St. Mungo's. 4th floor. The secure ward where the stripped Wizengamot members were being held for observation. Harry arrived with Neville and 4 Aurors within 8 minutes of Ron's message, and the scene was wrong. Not violent. No blown doors, no curse damage. The security wards were intact. The monitoring spells showed no breach. The 2 Aurors assigned to Malfoy's room were conscious, alert, and completely bewildered. He was here, one of them said, a young witch named Pemberton. I checked on him at midnight. He was in bed. I checked again at 6. Bed was empty. But the wards, I don't understand, the wards show no one leaving. Harry walked into the room. Single bed, standard St. Mungo's issue. A chair. A table with an untouched breakfast tray. The window was sealed, 4th floor, spelled shut, no outside access. The door had been warded to alert on any passage. He closed his eyes and let the rings reach out. They could feel magical signatures, residues, and here, in this room, something was off. Not magic. Not exactly. But something. There was something here, Harry said slowly. Something prepared. Something that was already in the room before he arrived. Neville was examining the walls. A portkey? Pre-placed. Portkeys trigger the wards. Pemberton shook her head. We'd have detected activation. Not a portkey, Harry said. His hands moved over the bed, the table, the walls, feeling for the residue of whatever had happened. And then he found it. Under the bed frame. A mark, carved into the wood, small enough to be invisible unless you knew to look. Runes. Old ones. Not wand carved, knife carved. Done by hand. These are pre-war, Harry said. Someone carved these into this bed frame years ago. Before the judgment. Before any of this. Daphne had arrived, she'd followed them from Grimmauld Place, and she crouched beside him, looking at the runes. Her face went pale. I know these, she said. Family archives. These are transfer runes. Old magic, really old, pre-ministry. They're used to move a person between two linked locations without magical transport. No apparition, no portkey, no flow. It's almost like the room itself moves the person. That's impossible, Pemberton said. It's not impossible. It's just forgotten. Daphne stood, her expression grim. He planned this. God, he planned this years ago. He had these runes carved into a bed at St. Mungo's, probably during one of his charitable donations to the hospital wing, knowing that if he was ever incapacitated or imprisoned here, he'd have an escape route that no modern ward would detect. Where do they link to? Harry asked. Wherever the paired set is. Could be anywhere. His manor, a safe house, another country, Malfoy Manor, Harry said. He could feel it, now that he knew what to look for, he could trace the faint thread of old magic from the runes, stretching southward. Toward Wiltshire. He's at the manor. He's a squib, Neville said. Even if he escaped, what can he? He's been planning contingencies for years, Harry said. This isn't just escape. This is the next phase. He said it wasn't over. He meant it. He was already moving, heading for the door. Daphne, stay here. Coordinate with Amelia. Neville, I'm coming with you. I know. Harry didn't argue. He wouldn't have either, if their positions were reversed. Let's go. Malfoy Manor's gates were open. That was wrong. The gates of Malfoy Manor were never open, they were warded, locked, enchanted to allow entry only by blood or invitation. But they stood wide now, iron serpents frozen mid-snarl, the long drive stretching ahead into the darkness of the grounds. Harry stood at the threshold and felt the wards. They were damaged. Not destroyed, but altered. Warped. Something had been done to them from inside, something that stripped away the defensive enchantments while leaving the structure intact. Like removing the poison from a snake while leaving the fangs. Trap, Neville said. Not a question. Obviously. We're going in anyway. Obviously. They walked up the drive. The peacocks were gone, the grounds were empty, silent, the manicured hedges casting long shadows in the late afternoon light. The manor itself loomed at the end of the drive, all pale stone and tall windows, beautiful in the way that expensive things are beautiful, designed to impress rather than comfort. The front door was open too. Harry walked in. The entrance hall was dim, no lights, magical or otherwise. But Harry didn't need lights. The rings let him see magic, and the manor was saturated with it, old enchantments woven into every stone, every timber. And something else. Something newer. A trail of magic, not Lucius's, because Lucius had no magic now, but something else. Something that felt wrong in a way Harry couldn't immediately identify. Do you feel that? Neville murmured. Yeah. They moved deeper into the house. Through the entrance hall, past the drawing room where Harry had once been brought as a prisoner, where Hermione had been tortured, where so much pain had happened. He didn't let himself feel it now. Later. Not now. The trail led downward. A staircase, hidden behind a wall panel that stood open, descending into darkness. Harry could feel the wrongness intensifying as they descended. Whatever was down there was the source. The basement, no, not a basement. A ritual chamber. The stairs opened into a circular room of black stone, carved with runes that hurt to look at directly. At the center, a stone pedestal. On the pedestal, an object that made Harry's rings scream. It was a crystal. Fist-sized, dark amber, and it was pulsing. Not with light, with magic. With someone's magic. And Harry understood, he stored his magic, Harry breathed. Before the judgment. He took his own magic out and put it in that thing. Is that possible? Neville's wand was up, pointed at the crystal. It shouldn't be. But look at the runes, they're siphoning runes, designed to extract magical essence and preserve it. He must have done this over weeks. Months. Slowly draining his own core into this crystal so that when the judgment came, what it stripped from him was already empty, Neville finished. The judgment took what was left. But the bulk of his power was already here. Clever boy, isn't he? The voice came from behind them. Not from the stairs, from a doorway Harry hadn't seen, hidden in the shadows at the edge of the ritual chamber. Lucius Malfoy stepped through, and he was different. Not the broken squib from the Wizengamot chamber. Not the hollow-eyed man from St. Mungo's. He stood straight, his bearing returned to its full aristocratic arrogance, and in his right hand he held the amber crystal. As Harry watched, the crystal's glow intensified, and Lucius's hand began to glow with it. The magic was flowing back. Returning to its owner. Not all of it, Harry could see that the crystal still held the majority, but enough. Enough for what Lucius intended. Did you really think, Lucius said, his voice silky and controlled, that I wouldn't prepare for every eventuality? I've survived 2 Dark Lords, Potter. I survived your little judgment. And I will survive you. You put your magic in a phylactery, Harry said. Like a Horcrux. Except instead of your soul, please. Don't compare me to that half-blood monstrosity. Lucius raised his free hand, the one without the crystal, and his wand was there, pulled from somewhere Harry couldn't see. I am nothing like Riddle. Riddle was insane. I am simply practical. You're a squib holding a battery, Harry said. Put it down, Lucius. It's over. Over. Lucius laughed. Not the desperate laugh of a broken man, the genuine laugh of someone who believed they were winning. It's just beginning. You stripped 43 people of their magic. 43 of the most powerful families in Britain. Do you know what that means? Do you know what happens when you create 43 families who have nothing left to lose? They come to me. They're already coming to me. Letters, Potter. Dozens of them. Pledging loyalty, pledging gold, pledging their children's futures, all to the one man who planned ahead. The one man who can give them back what you took. Harry felt cold. You can't give them their magic back. Can't I? Lucius raised the crystal higher. It blazed, amber light filling the chamber, dancing off the black stone walls. This crystal holds enough raw magical energy to reignite a dozen cores. Perhaps more. The ritual is complex, ancient, but I've spent 20 years preparing it. I can give them back their magic, not all of it, perhaps, but enough. And in exchange, they'll owe me everything. Not the Wizengamot. Not the ministry. Me. He smiled. That aristocratic, superior smile that hadn't changed since Harry was 12 years old. You broke the old system, Potter. Congratulations. And in its place, I will build something better. A system with one voice at its top. Mine. You're delusional, Neville said flatly. Am I? 43 families, desperate, angry, grieving. All of them blaming Potter. All of them willing to do anything, to regain what they lost. And I'm the only one offering. Lucius pointed his wand at Harry. All I need is for you to be out of the way. The spell came fast, faster than Harry expected from a man running on partial magic, and it was dark. Killing curse green. Not the Avada Kedavra itself, but something close, something from the same family of magic, designed to destroy rather than simply harm. Harry didn't dodge. He raised his hand, and the rings blazed, all 4 of them, and the curse hit his palm and stopped. Not absorbed this time. Stopped. Held in the air like a frozen thing, green light twisting between Harry's fingers. I killed Voldemort, Harry said, very quietly. You are not Voldemort. He closed his fist. The curse shattered, fragments of green light dissipating like sparks. The shockwave of it pushed outward, and Lucius staggered, just a step, his borrowed magic flickering. Lucius fired again. 3 spells in rapid succession, Harry didn't bother identifying them. He walked forward, through them, the combined protection of 4 ancient houses eating each curse like a candle eating air. They didn't touch him. Couldn't touch him. Neville, Harry said, still walking forward. The crystal. Neville moved. Fast, decisive, a summoning charm that crossed the chamber like a whip crack. Lucius tried to hold on, tried to shield the crystal with his body, but Neville's spell was enhanced by the same ambient magic that had flooded the clean members during the chamber battle. It was stronger than Lucius expected. The crystal tore free of Lucius's grip and sailed across the chamber into Neville's hand. Lucius screamed. Not in pain, in rage. The magic he'd been channeling guttered as the crystal left his possession, his connection to it stretching and thinning. He was draining, Harry could see it, the partial magic he'd reclaimed fading from his core like water from a cracked cup. No, Lucius lunged. Not for the crystal, for Harry. Physical, desperate, the movement of a man who had nothing left but his body and his hatred. His hands closed on the front of Harry's robes, and Harry let him. Let the former Lord Malfoy grab him, pull him close, stare into his face from inches away with those wild grey eyes. You ruined everything, Lucius whispered. His grip was weakening, his borrowed magic almost gone, his body remembering what it was now, mundane, fragile, mortal. Everything I built. Everything you built was built on corpses, Harry said. On bribery and murder and torture and lies. It was never going to last, Lucius. I just sped up the inevitable. Lucius's hands fell away. He sagged, not dramatically, not like a villain in a story. He just, diminished. Collapsed inward. His knees didn't buckle but his spine did, curving, and he looked old suddenly. Old and small and finished. Harry stepped back. Neville. Neville was holding the crystal carefully, at arm's length, his face twisted in discomfort. This thing feels wrong. Like holding a jar full of wasps. We need to destroy it. Harry looked at it, the amber glow still pulsing, all that stolen magic trapped inside. If anyone else gets their hands on it, can we though? Neville looked at him. Destroy it without the magic just dissipating? Going somewhere dangerous? Harry reached out with the rings. Felt the crystal's magic, its structure. It was raw power, no consciousness, no soul fragments like a Horcrux, just pure magical energy extracted from a person's core. And through the Emrys ring, he could feel what it wanted to do. Where it wanted to go. It wants to go back to the earth, Harry said slowly. It's ambient magic, it was always ambient magic, just channeled through a person. If we break the crystal, it'll return to the ley lines. Back into the natural flow. Then break it. Harry took the crystal from Neville. It buzzed against his palm, hot and angry, but the rings contained it, for frequencies of ancient magic caging the raw power like a frame around a fire. He held it up. Looked at Lucius, crumpled on the floor of his own ritual chamber, watching with dead eyes. Your backup plan is over, Harry said. Your army of grateful squibs won't be coming. No one is coming for you, Lucius. Not this time. He squeezed. The crystal resisted, then didn't. It cracked, then shattered, and golden light erupted from the fragments, not violent, not explosive, but rushing, flowing outward and downward, sinking into the stone floor, into the earth, back into the ley lines that ran beneath Britain like veins beneath skin. Harry felt it go, felt the magic returning to where it belonged, to the great cycling current of natural power that fed every magical being on the island. The ritual chamber went dark. Silent. Just 3 men in a stone room, 2 standing, 1 on the floor. Harry looked down at Lucius Malfoy, truly finished now, his last contingency destroyed, his magic gone with no possibility of return, and felt nothing. Not triumph, not pity, not satisfaction. Just, a closed door. A finished chapter. Horrors are coming, Harry said. He could feel them through the manor's wards, approaching the gates, entering the grounds. Amelia must have sent them when Daphne reported where they'd gone. They'll take you into custody. You'll face trial for the mercenary attack. I imagine it won't go well for you. Lucius said nothing. Just sat on the floor of his ritual chamber, surrounded by crystal dust that caught the faint light from the stairway above, and stared at nothing. Harry turned and walked up the stairs. Neville followed, a step behind. The manor was silent around them, oppressively so, a house stripped of purpose. Whatever magic had animated it, whatever dark power had lived in its walls, felt diminished now. Just a big empty building full of expensive things that no longer mattered. They emerged into the evening air, and Harry breathed deep. The ground smelled of grass and approaching rain, and the wards he'd felt warped on the way in were settling, stabilizing, going dormant without a magical owner to maintain them. The manor would sleep now. Perhaps for a long time. Aurors were coming up the drive, 4 of them, wands lit. Harry raised a hand in greeting. He's in the basement, Harry called. No resistance. He's done. The Aurors nodded and moved past them into the house. Professional. Efficient. The system working the way it was supposed to work. It was such a simple thing, authority used for its intended purpose, and it had been so rare for so long. Neville stood beside him on the manor steps, looking out over the dark grounds. The ginger cat, wait, no, that was Greengrass Manor. There were no cats here. Just peacocks hiding in the hedgerows, and the lengthening shadows, and the sense of something ending. Is it over now? Neville asked. Really over? Harry thought about it. The judgment. The battle. The press conference. The escape. The ritual chamber. The crystal, shattered, its magic returned to the earth. Lucius is done, Harry said. But the work isn't. We've still got a government to build. Yeah. Neville was quiet for a moment. Then, but the fighting part. The part where people try to kill us. Is that over? Harry felt through the rings. Felt the wards of the ministry, calm. Felt the Wizengamot chamber, quiet and clean. Felt the city around him, magical Britain settling into its new shape like water finding its level. I think so, he said. Yeah. I think the fighting's done. Neville nodded. Rolled his shoulders. Good. I could use a drink. Harry laughed, surprised by it, a real laugh that came from his chest. Yeah. Me too. Let's go home. They disapparated from the manor grounds, leaving the big empty house to the aurors and the gathering dark, and Harry felt lighter than he had in months. In years, maybe. The weight of the rings was still there, would always be there, probably, but it was a good weight now. The weight of responsibility accepted rather than imposed. Of power chosen rather than thrust upon him. The fighting was done. Now came the building. And Harry found, to his genuine surprise, that he was looking forward to it. Chapter 5, What Comes After 6 weeks later, Harry stood in the rebuilt Wizengamot chamber and felt nothing but silence from the rings. Not the oppressive silence of broken oaths festering in the walls. Not the heavy quiet of corruption weighing down the magic. Just, silence. Clean and empty, the way a room feels after you've finally cleared out the furniture and opened the windows and let the air move. The chamber had been physically rebuilt after the mercenary attack, new doors, repaired stonework, but more than that, the magical architecture had changed. The oaths were gone. The old binding magic, the founder's original framework that had calcified over centuries into something rotten, had dissolved when the judgment completed its work. The chamber was just a room now. A room waiting to become something new. It feels different, Neville said, standing beside him. He ran a hand along the back of one of the old wooden seats. Lighter. It is lighter. The old oath magic was massive. Centuries of accumulated magical weight, just, gone. Harry moved to the center of the floor, where the chief warlock's podium had stood. It was gone now too, removed during the renovation. The new chamber wouldn't have a single elevated position. The redesign called for a circular table, everyone at the same level. Hermione's idea, pulled from Muggle parliamentary traditions. Think it'll work? The new system? Neville shrugged. Better than the old one. Low bar, admittedly. Extremely low bar. They were here early, the inauguration ceremony wasn't for another 3 hours, because Harry had wanted a moment alone with the space. Or as alone as you got these days, which always included at least Neville and usually Daphne and sometimes an auror or two lurking at the doors. Not because Harry needed protection, the rings made that redundant, but because Amelia Bones ran a professional operation and professional operations included security details for heads of state, even unofficial reluctant ones. The past 6 weeks had been a blur of work. Not the dramatic kind. No more battles, no more revelations, no more Malfoys crawling out of ritual chambers. Just the slow, exhausting, necessary labor of building a government from scratch. Harry had been involved in every major decision while trying very hard not to make them all himself. That was the balance he kept having to find, being present enough to prevent corruption from creeping back in, while absent enough that the new system learned to function without him. Hermione had been invaluable. She'd drafted the constitutional framework, a magical charter of rights, she called it, that established the new governing body, the Magical Council of Britain. 31 seats, all elected, no bloodline requirements. Term limits. Mandatory transparency. An independent judiciary separate from the legislative body. An oversight commission with the power to investigate and, if necessary, remove sitting members. Every safeguard she could think of, woven into the structure from the ground up rather than bolted on after the fact. The elections had been held last week. 31 seats, filled by popular vote. The turnout was staggering, 89% of registered magical citizens, the highest participation rate in recorded history. People had lined up outside polling stations for hours. Some of them cried when they cast their ballots. It was the first time in many of their lives that their vote had actually mattered, that they'd been choosing representatives rather than watching hereditary lords play games with their futures. The results were interesting. Diverse. Not what any one faction would have chosen, which probably meant it was right. Muggleborns, half-bloods, pure-bloods. Old families and new. A werewolf, Selena Ashgrove, the first non-human magical being ever elected to a governing position in Britain. A goblin rights advocate. A former Hogwarts professor. Percy Weasley, who'd won his seat in a landslide after campaigning on government transparency and institutional reform. And Hermione herself, who'd been elected despite insisting she didn't want to run, after a draft campaign organized by approximately 400,000 people who'd read her charter and decided they wanted the person who wrote it to be in charge of implementing it. She's going to be brilliant, Harry had said to Ron, watching the results come in. Obviously, Ron had said. She's Hermione. He'd paused. I'm going to be a political spouse. That's going to be weird. You'll be great at it. I'll be terrible at it. I'll say something wrong at some dinner party and cause an international incident. Probably. She'll still love you. Ron had grinned. Yeah. She will. Now, 3 hours before the inauguration, Harry stood in the empty chamber and let himself feel the weight of what they'd accomplished. Not pride exactly, more like relief. The bone-deep relief of having carried something impossibly heavy and finally setting it down. You're brooding, Daphne said from the doorway. He hadn't heard her arrive, but that wasn't unusual. She moved like a cat when she wanted to, silent and deliberate. Today she was dressed in deep green, her hair down, and she looked relaxed. More relaxed than he'd ever seen her. The permanent tension she carried in her shoulders, the sharpness that was always just slightly too sharp, had softened over the past weeks. Not disappeared. Just eased. I'm not brooding. I'm reflecting. That's brooding with better posture. She crossed the chamber to stand beside him, her heels clicking against the stone floor. Astoria told me this morning. Harry turned to look at her. And? The research team found something. A possible approach to the blood curse, something involving ley line magic and core regeneration. It's early. Theoretical. But it's more than anyone's had in 30 years. Her voice was steady, controlled, but Harry could see it in her eyes, hope. Real hope, fragile and fierce. She's been invited to participate in the research. As a subject and a consultant. They want to understand the curse from the inside. That's, Daphne, that's brilliant. It's a start. She looked away, blinking rapidly. Sorry. I'm not good at, you don't have to be good at it. You're allowed to just feel things. She laughed, a short, surprised sound. Is that what we're doing now? Feeling things? Apparently. They stood there in the empty chamber, side by side, and something had changed between them over the past 6 weeks. Not dramatically, no grand declarations, no movie moment kisses in the rain. Just a steady accumulation of late nights working together, of shared meals, of arguments that resolved into understanding, of trust built one decision at a time. Harry wasn't sure what to call it yet. Daphne probably had a strategic name for it, filed in one of her leather notebooks. Your father, Harry said. How is he? The question landed gently. They'd talked about Cyrus Greengrass before, multiple times, each conversation a little less painful than the last. Better, Daphne said. He's adjusting. It's hard. Going from a wizard to a squib is, she shook her head. He doesn't blame you. Not anymore. He blames himself, mostly, which isn't healthy either, but at least it's accurate. Has he talked to you? Last week. Finally. She was quiet for a moment. He said he was sorry. That he should have been braver. That he should have put Astoria above politics years ago and he was a coward. Another pause. He cried. I've never seen my father cry before. I'm sorry. Don't be. It was necessary. All of it. She turned to face him, and her expression was open in a way it rarely was, no mask, no calculation, just Daphne. You know, when I approached you outside Gringotts that day, I had a plan. A very specific, strategic, controlled plan for how this alliance would work. Leverage and outcomes and carefully maintained emotional distance. And you're extremely difficult to maintain emotional distance from. It's irritating. Harry grinned. Sorry about that. You're not sorry at all. Not even slightly. She held his gaze for a long moment, and then she kissed him. Brief and precise, like everything she did, but warm underneath, and real, and when she pulled back her cheeks were faintly pink, which Harry had never seen before and found extremely satisfying. That's been distracting me for about 4 weeks, she said. Now it's done. We can focus. Right. Focusing. Absolutely. Harry was still grinning. What are we focusing on? The inauguration. Which is in 3 hours. And at which you are expected to give a speech. I hate speeches. I know. Hermione wrote you one. I'm not reading Hermione's speech. I know that too. Which is why I wrote you a backup one. She pulled a folded parchment from her robes and pressed it into his hand. Don't worry, it sounds like you. Short sentences. Straightforward. Only 2 words over 3 syllables. You're hilarious. I'm pragmatic. There's a difference. She stepped back, smoothing her robes, the mask sliding partially back into place, but lighter now. Worn by choice rather than necessity. I'll see you in 3 hours. Try not to brood the entire time. Reflect, Harry corrected. I'm reflecting. She waved a hand dismissively and left, her heels echoing in the empty chamber. Harry watched her go and felt good. Simply, uncomplicatedly good. Which was novel enough to be worth noting. 2 hours before the inauguration, Dumbledore found him. Harry was in the ministry cafeteria, of all places, eating a sandwich because he'd forgotten to eat breakfast and Creature wasn't here to force food on him. The cafeteria was mostly empty, the staff busy preparing for the ceremony, and Harry had a corner table to himself. Until Dumbledore sat down across from him, carrying a cup of tea and looking, well, better than he had 6 weeks ago. Still old, still worn, but there was something settled in him now. A peace that hadn't been there before. Harry. Dumbledore. I wanted to speak with you before the ceremony. If you have a moment. Harry gestured at his sandwich. I have about half a sandwich's worth of moment. That should suffice. Dumbledore wrapped his good hand around his teacup, the blackened one stayed in his lap, as it usually did, and looked at Harry with those blue eyes that had lost some of their twinkle but none of their depth. I owe you an apology. Harry stopped chewing. Set down the sandwich. For what specifically? For doubting you. When you came to me in the library, when you told me your plan, I told you that power corrupts. That concentrating so much authority in one person was dangerous. That you would become something you didn't want to be. He sipped his tea. I was projecting. My own failures. My own weaknesses. I looked at you holding those rings and I saw myself at 17, holding the Deathly Hallows, dreaming of a world I would reshape through force. And I assumed your story would follow mine. It hasn't. No. It decidedly has not. Dumbledore set his cup down. 6 weeks, Harry. You've held the power of 4 ancient houses for 6 weeks. In that time, you have stripped the corrupt, defended the innocent, dismantled a hereditary power structure, supervised the creation of a democratic framework, held free elections, and are now preparing to hand over authority to elected representatives. At no point have you used your power for personal gain. At no point have you silenced dissent. At no point have you done anything other than what you said you would do. Was that really so hard to believe? Dumbledore smiled. It was sad and fond and self-aware. For me? Yes. Because I couldn't have done it. At your age, holding what you hold, I would have found reasons to keep it. Just 1 more year, I would have told myself. Just until the new system is stable. Just until I'm sure. And 1 more year would have become 10, and 10 would have become always, and I would have become, he didn't finish the thought. Didn't need to. I'm not you, Harry said. For the second time. But this time it wasn't confrontational. It was just true. You are not. And I am profoundly grateful for that. Dumbledore stood, picking up his tea. You will do well today. Not because of the rings or the power or the name. Because you are, simply, a good man. And a good man with power who uses it properly and then sets it down is the rarest thing in any world. He left. Harry sat with his sandwich and thought about that for a while. Then he finished eating and went to get ready for the ceremony. The inauguration of the Magical Council of Britain took place in the rebuilt chamber at 3 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon in September. The gallery was packed, not just with wizards and witches but with delegations from other magical nations. The French ministry had sent their minister personally. Makusa sent a senior representative. The ICW observers sat in a designated section, notebooks open, watching everything with the intense focus of people who were wondering if this could work and what it would mean for their own governments if it did. The 31 elected council members sat in their new seats, the circular table, all at one level, no elevated positions. Some looked nervous. Some looked excited. Hermione looked like she was already mentally drafting legislation. Percy looked like he'd been born for this, straight-backed and serious and ready. Harry stood at the edge of the chamber, not the center. Not above. At the edge, where the observers sat, where the public sat. This was deliberate. Today wasn't about him. Amelia Bones conducted the ceremony. As interim head of state, it was her authority that would formally transfer to the new council. She stood at the table's edge, not a podium, just standing among them, and her voice carried clearly through the chamber. For over 1,000 years, magical Britain has been governed by the Wizengamot. A body founded on the principle that magic confers responsibility, and that those who hold it must use it in service of the community. She paused, letting the weight of those words settle. That principle was betrayed. For centuries, it was betrayed. And 6 weeks ago, the consequences of that betrayal were finally enacted. She looked around the table, at the 31 faces, diverse and determined. Today, we begin again. Not with oaths bound into the walls. Not with magic that punishes failure after the fact. But with something harder and more human, with trust. With accountability. With the will of the people who chose you, freely, to represent them. The ceremony was simple. Each council member stood, spoke their name and constituency, and pledged to serve. Not a magical oath, Hermione had argued passionately against binding oaths, and the charter reflected that. Just a promise, made publicly, witnessed by the people they served. If they broke it, the consequences would be human consequences, removal by vote, investigation, prosecution. The way it should always have been. When it was done, when all 31 had spoken, Amelia turned to Harry. Lord Potter, she said. As the authority who enacted the Founder's judgment and oversaw the transition, it falls to you to formally transfer governance to this body. Do you so transfer? Harry stepped forward. Into the circle, but not to sit. I do. And do you relinquish the extraordinary powers assumed during the transition period? This was the moment. The moment Dumbledore had feared wouldn't come. The moment that defined everything, not the judgment, not the battle, not the destruction, but this. The giving back. I do. He felt it happen, a shift in the chamber's magic. Not dramatic, not painful. Just a releasing. The connection between the rings and the Wizengamot chamber, that constant awareness, that spiderweb sensitivity to everything happening in the building, thinned and quieted. Not severed entirely, the rings were his, would always be his, but the governance link released. The chamber belonged to the council now. Then let the record show, Amelia said, that governance of magical Britain has been transferred from the Emergency Transitional Authority to the duly elected Magical Council of Britain, effective this moment. Applause. Not polite applause, real applause, loud and sustained, from the gallery, from the delegations, from the council members themselves. Harry stepped back, out of the circle, and felt the weight lift from his shoulders like shrugging off a heavy coat. Done. Finally, completely done. After the ceremony, there was a reception. Harry endured it for about 45 minutes, shaking hands, accepting congratulations, deflecting questions from foreign dignitaries, before Daphne materialized at his elbow and steered him toward a side door. You've done your duty. If one more person asks you about the rings, you're going to start being rude, and we can't have that in front of the Bulgarian delegation. I wasn't going to be rude. Your eye was twitching. That's pre-rude. She guided him through a corridor and out a back entrance into a small courtyard he'd never seen before, hidden between ministry buildings, open to the sky, with a single bench and some determined-looking ivy climbing the walls. Sit. Breathe. Harry sat. Breathed. The late afternoon sky above was grey and gold, clouds moving fast overhead. London sounds filtered in faintly, the Muggle world going about its business, completely unaware of what had happened today in the magical one. It's done, Harry said. It's done. Daphne sat beside him on the bench. Close enough that their shoulders touched. How does it feel? He thought about it honestly. Quiet. My head is, quiet. For the first time in, maybe ever. There's nothing I need to do. Nothing coming. Nobody trying to kill me or use me or, he stopped. Laughed a little. I don't know what to do with that. You could try enjoying it. I could. I might be bad at it. I've never really practiced. I'm an excellent tutor. She leaned against his shoulder, a deliberate choice, small and significant. Astoria's first treatment is next week. The research team is cautiously optimistic. Good. She wants to meet you. Officially. She says anyone who destroyed the government for her deserves at least a dinner invitation. I didn't destroy the government for her. I destroyed it for lots of reasons. I know. But let her have her narrative. It makes her feel important. Harry turned his head to look at her. This close, in the soft light, she looked younger than her 17 years, but also older. They both did. You couldn't do what they'd done and stay young in the ways that mattered. What happens now? He asked. For you. Now I do what greengrasses have always done. Information and strategy. Except instead of using it for leverage and survival, I use it for, she gestured vaguely. Whatever this is. Building things. Helping things work properly. It turns out I'm quite good at constructive politics when the system isn't rigged against everyone who tries. And us? She raised an eyebrow. Us? You kissed me 3 hours ago. I did. Very efficient of me. So, us? Daphne was quiet for a moment, and Harry could see her turning it over, not with the cold calculation of the woman who'd approached him outside Gringotts 6 weeks ago, but with something gentler. More uncertain. More real. I spent my whole life planning, she said. Every relationship, every alliance, every conversation, planned and strategic and controlled. And then you walked out of Gringotts with 4 rings and I thought, there. That's my leverage. My path to saving my sister. Use him. She looked at her hands. And somewhere in the past 6 weeks, use him, became, work with him, became, stay up until 2 in the morning talking about government theory with him, became, this. Whatever this is. It doesn't have to be strategic, Harry said. I know. That's what terrifies me. She looked up at him, and for once there was no mask at all. Just a young woman who'd sacrificed her father's magic for her sister's life and come out the other side of it with something she hadn't planned for. I don't know how to do this without a plan. Neither do I. I've been improvising since I was 11. That's actually very obvious from the outside. Thanks. She laughed, a real one, not the controlled social laugh she deployed at functions. Then she took his hand. Her fingers were cool and steady and sure, even if the rest of her wasn't. Okay, she said. No plan. We just see. We just see, Harry agreed. They sat on the bench in the hidden courtyard as the afternoon faded toward evening, hands intertwined, the sounds of the reception filtering faintly through the walls. Tomorrow there would be work, there was always work, a new government finding its feet, international relationships to build, old wounds to heal. Harry would keep his rings, keep his seats in the new advisory capacity the charter designated for ancestral houses, voice without vote, influence without control. He'd be there. Watching. Ready, if it ever went wrong again. But he didn't think it would. Not this time. Not with Hermione in the chamber and Amelia at the helm and 31 people who'd been chosen by their community rather than born into power. Not with the memory of what had happened to the last group fresh in everyone's minds. The rings hummed softly on his fingers. Quiet. Content. The way powerful things feel when they're at rest, not diminished, just waiting. Ready if needed. Patient. Harry was done saving the world. He'd done it twice now, once with sacrifice, once with judgment, and that was enough for anyone. Let someone else carry it for a while. He was 17 years old and he had a girl beside him and friends who loved him and a future that, for the first time in his life, wasn't defined by prophecy or war or obligation. He could be anything now. Do anything. Go anywhere. For the first time since he was 11 years old, Harry Potter's future was entirely his own. 2 weeks after the inauguration, Harry received one last visitor. He was at Grimmauld Place, which was becoming less a war room and more a home these days, creatures cooking improving now that he wasn't feeding a crisis team, when the flu activated unexpectedly. The wards didn't trigger, which meant it was someone keyed in, and when the green flames cleared, Ragnox stepped out. The goblin looked the same as he had in that Gringotts office 6 weeks ago, boulder-like, sharp-eyed, immaculately waistcoat. He brushed soot from his lapels and looked around the drawing room with the appraising gaze of someone calculating property values. Director Ragnox, Harry said, setting down the book he'd been reading. I wasn't expecting you. A social call, Ragnox said, which Harry was fairly sure goblins didn't make. May I sit? Please. Ragnox took an armchair, perching on its edge the way he'd perched on the desk in his office. His dark eyes fixed on Harry with that weighing and measuring look. The Goblin Nation has been watching, Ragnox said. The judgment. The transition. The election. The transfer of power. He paused. We are impressed. High praise. It is. We do not give it lightly. Ragnox reached into his waistcoat and produced something, a small object, wrapped in cloth. He set it on the table between them. A gift. From the nation to Lord Potter. Harry unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a pin, goblin-made, silver and gold twisted together in a design that incorporated 4 tiny gemstones, ruby, obsidian, emerald, and one that shifted color like the Emrys ring. What is it? A symbol. Among our people, it represents a debt acknowledged and honored. We told you to thank us when it was done. Ragnox's sharp teeth showed in something that was probably a smile. It is done. We thank you. Harry turned the pin in his fingers. Goblin made, it would last forever. Never tarnish, never break. Like the changes they'd made, hopefully. The new council has the goblin rights reform on their first-month agenda, Harry said. Full renegotiation of the Gringotts treaties. Wand rights. Property rights. Everything your people have been asking for. We know. Your Miss Granger has already contacted us about preliminary discussions. The smile that was probably a smile widened. She is, thorough. That's one word for it. We have waited 1,000 years for fair treatment from wizard kind. A few more months for paperwork is acceptable. Ragnarok stood. I will not take more of your time. Enjoy your evening, Lord Potter. You have earned rest. He stepped toward the flue, then paused. Turned back. One thing. The rings. They are yours, permanently, irrevocably. But you should know, they will pass to your heirs, in time. All 4 lines, united. Whoever inherits them will inherit the authority of the judgment. I know. Then raise them well. Whoever they are. The goblin held his gaze for a moment. The nation will be watching. As always. Green flames, and he was gone. Harry sat alone in the drawing room of Grimmauld Place, turning the goblin pin in his fingers, the rings quiet on his hands. Outside, London moved through its evening, car horns and distant music and the rhythms of a world that kept turning regardless of what happened in hidden chambers beneath it. He pinned the goblin's gift to his collar. It caught the light, 4 tiny gemstones winking like stars. Ruby for Potter. Obsidian for Black. Emerald for Slytherin. Shifting color for Emrys. His legacy. His responsibility. His choice. Harry picked up his book, settled back in his chair, and read until Daphne arrived for dinner, which she did, punctually, with wine and a dossier on international trade policy that she insisted they discuss over food and which he insisted they ignore in favor of actual conversation. They compromised, as they were learning to do, 20 minutes of policy, the rest of the evening just talking. About everything and nothing. About Astoria's first treatment, which had gone well. About Neville's plan to take over the Hogwarts herbology position when Sprout retired. About Ron's latest crisis about what to wear to Hermione's first official council dinner. Normal things. Quiet things. The things that make up a life when you're not busy saving the world. Outside, magical Britain continued to breathe. Imperfect, struggling, new, but free. Free in a way it hadn't been in centuries. And somewhere in the foundations of the ministry, in the stones of the Wizengamot chamber that was now the council chamber, the ancient magic slept. Clean and patient. Waiting, as it had always waited, for someone worthy to call on it. It would not be needed for a very long time.